Lord of Mysteries, Fire of Destruction 441-450 on the outskirts of the City of Calamities. Cracking his knuckles a little, the redhead observed the solitary flame in front of him with calm eyes. This flame represented the demigod of the Tamara family, Dabrio, if that was his real name. It's most likely that it is. Praying towards a hidden existence to receive help, he had already assumed that he would surrender a part of his being and decided to use his real name. That way he would show his honesty. Sighing slightly, the redhead shrugged his shoulders without much interest. It was now 2 a.m., and although it was pretty late, it was a perfect time to take the first step towards a new stockpile. It had been a few days since he discovered that this guy had prayed to him for help. Adrian had waited a few days to organize his priorities and resolve his problems, but now that he had several free days ahead of him, the time had come. Extending his spirituality to this flame, it expanded until it formed a window of fire that began to show a scene. Adrian immediately noticed the room's different style. From what he remembered, it was a typical cheap hotel room in Bayam. Change hiding places? So quickly? It can't be because he prayed to me and is trying to escape. Once he prayed, a connection was formed once I accepted it. He is a demigod, so he must know this. Running away from the monarch is useless at this point, so it must not be me who is running away. The redhead held his chin curiously. He wasn't exaggerating when he said they were being hunted down one by one. The redhead was somewhat impressed. It seems that the fallen branches of this family have a good support if they can afford to hunt another demigod so intensely. Of course, if the situation hadn't been so bad, he doubted that this Dabrio would have prayed to him in the first place. Leaving that aside, the redhead crooked his neck and smiled mischievously. It was time to send a message. Blinking a little dazed, a man looked around him, first in confusion, which quickly turned to alertness. He had barely gone to sleep after a busy day and now he found himself in the middle of a large, lush forest. He knew it was a kind of dream, but not the type. The trees were unfamiliar, and everything looked strange. His spirituality did not indicate any danger, but he would not let his guard down just because of that. Suddenly, from among the leafy trees, a fox with orange colors resembling fire came out and walked towards him. Its fur did not look like hair but like flames, the way the flames danced in the air. Its eyes were intelligent and it exhibited great serenity and calm. The fox stopped more than 20 meters from him. Golden dust began to emerge from its body, and it floated in the air. Quickly, these letters formed a message in Hermes. September 24th. Come alone. Immediately afterwards, the scene shifted to show the outside of a forest and a village. It focused on a sign with the name Oshid on it. Next to that sign, a few words were written. Lenberg. After that, the dream began to collapse. Everything became blurred and fragmented. But, amid these fragments, golden dust began to write another sentence in Hermes. The scarlet monarch who burns depravity, the calamity forgotten by time. The stranger who comes from the unknown. That three-line name was barely visible for 3 seconds before the dream collapsed and the man woke up agitated. But that agitation quickly turned to joy and relief. An answer. I received an answer from the Scarlet Monarch. With a soft sigh, the man got out of the bed where he was lying, grabbed the briefcase by his side and left the room. He was far from Lenberg, so he had to take a boat as soon as possible. He could feel his heart beating fast, but he did not let it affect him. He continued on his way, always alert to his surroundings. These days were a game of cat and mouse and he was running out of time to hide. They were getting closer, and now was not the time to hesitate. Adrian looked at what Dabrio Tamara was doing through the fire window with a slightly furrowed brow. He wouldn't have minded pulling the demigod in and bringing him here to ask better questions, but that was beyond him now. It didn't fit his image as Scarlet Monarch, but he could also risk that this desperate family's perception of him would change for the worse. So far, Adrian had the complete advantage in this little chat they would have in a few days, no matter how it looked, and he had to keep it that way. For the Tamara family, who were already in short numbers and a desperate situation, once they learned what was happening, they would see it as a miracle. A messenger from God had been sent to listen to their problems, and from there it would be judged whether or not it was worth helping them. They probably believed that the Scarlet Monarch already had a strong base and an organization or powerful members that could protect them if they proved themselves deserving. If they had to believe in a hidden god to live, they would have no problem doing so. Getting an idea of what that family was thinking, Adrian couldn't help but snort in mockery and pity. Poor deluded souls. My dear worm is the strongest member of this hidden god by technicality, but her sequence is suppressed. Sharon takes her place for now in sequence level alone, but if I use my artifacts I can close that gap. Sighing a little, the redhead moved his beach chair and began to tap his chin. He would act based on the information he received from Dabrio Tamara about the fallen branches that were hunting this surviving righteous branch of the family. If until now they were only hunting them one by one through divinations, he could hide them using mirror divination and the hanged man's card of blasphemy. If a sizable group was hunting them, he could devise a plan to deal with them. Of course, as long as they didn't have something like an angel, but Adrian doubted that whoever was hunting the Tamara would send one. Besides, if they did send an angel for a broken family like the Tamara, Adrian could always use a little famous trick. Accuse them with the elders. This was Lenberg, the base of the Church of the God of Knowledge and Wisdom. No self-respecting secret organization would send an asset as valuable as an angel here. Sending an angel would not only be the stupidest thing they could do, but it would also be the easiest problem to solve that he would have to face. By simply revealing the angel's presence to the church, Adrian would let them deal with it themselves and enjoy the benefits of having helped the Tamara and the contribution points he would get from the church. But of course, that was if this organization was stupid. With all that in mind, the maximum hunting force that this fallen branch in Lenberg could employ would be a demigod with some sealed artifacts with a small team of Beyonders of medium sequence or just a demigod with a grade 1 artifact. Depending on which path it is, this can be easier, more difficult, or even become annoying. I'm not planning on dealing with a bizarro sorcerer. I's already faced a faceless once and that guy was a pain in the ass. The easiest to deal with would be another imperative major and Earl of the Fallen. With Dabrio, either of them would self-cancel each other and I would only have to worry about them not taking their clothes off and showing their incomplete form of mythological creatures. If they come with company, it won't be a problem. I have my own team to deal with them and I can also ask the church for support. Of course, the profits will have to be shared but ensuring victory and our lives is no loss. Pausing his accelerated train of thought, Adrian laughed a little and shook his head amused with himself. I don't even know what I'm up against and I'm already planning how to seize my profits. I guess I've got a bit of a goblin in me. Well, why deny it? Like any human being, I like shiny things too. The next sequence after Conspirator is Reaper. Perhaps reaping the biggest harvest from a battle is one of its acting rules. Adrian fiddled around a bit more, although he felt it could be like that. The first one had to go ahead to be able to prove it. Of course, that didn't mean he could act in advance. The redhead laughed some more and put the subject out of his mind. Only once he had more information would he act, not before. With everything ready and done, Adrian closed his eyes and, drawing the sphere of light, left the City of Calamities. After reopening his eyes in his room, the dark-haired man settled back into his bed, covered himself with thick sheets, closed his eyes, and, with the help of cogitation, quickly fell asleep. Blinking a little lost, Adrian looked around, confused before his eyes sharpened. A strange fog covered everything he saw. He could barely see about 3 fingers in front of him. A dream? With the familiar scenario, he immediately became alert. It had been months since he had last had a dream by himself, so it was suspicious that one happened so suddenly. In addition, he noticed how this dream seemed different from the others. Instead of appearing in a preformed scenario, he appeared directly in the middle of a dense fog. This doesn't look like the spirit world, yet I feel familiar in this. The island of consciousness? Is someone trying to enter my mind? Sensing the danger he might be in, he did not try to wake up immediately as such an action could cause a reaction. Not making any sudden movements, he looked at his body calmly. The clothes he was wearing were the same ones he had fallen asleep in. There was nothing different about them, nothing extra. Hunter's Hallow has not manifested itself, so until now my island has not been touched. Adrian noticed and narrowed his eyes slightly. After meeting Thaddeus and witnessing his attempts to read his mind, and his own use of Potter children's stories, Adrian knew that the tunic's protection extended to his mind and his island of consciousness. If someone tried to read it, they wouldn't be able to, and if someone tried to touch it, the tunic would react. As the latter had not happened, the danger was low for the moment. Looking around at this familiar but unfamiliar fog, Adrian raised an eyebrow slightly. Maybe it's just a dreamwalker passing through. In a way that would explain why I woke up, and now I'm here. Why the hell won't they let me sleep? Could I still suffer from bad karma for praying to Klein in the middle of the night those days? With a visible grimace of annoyance and a trembling eyelid, the man let out a soundless sigh. It seemed that he still had to pay for those little big annoyances he had caused too. Crack. Adrian heard as much as he felt something profound within him move, accompanied by a disgusting crunch. Very similar to the sound of bones breaking when crushed by a press. Cough. A slight cough escaped him and the taste of filthy iron filled his mouth. Everything became rough and he staggered, barely able to stand, vision blurring and his mind groggy. Adrian felt his eyes begin to water and something drip from his nose. Raising his left hand, he wiped it across his face and looked at it dazedly. His entire hand was covered in a bright crimson liquid, blood. Crack. Thud. The sensation from before hit him again, only much harder, and this time he fell to the floor of the dream, clutching his chest. Huff. 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 Agitated breaths escaped his lips, followed by gasps. His whole body began to tremble and shatter. He could feel the cracks in his right arm rising up his shoulder and reaching his neck. Cough, cough, cough. Bloody, gurgling coughs escaped from deep within his chest, drowning Adrian in his own blood and making it difficult to breathe. At some point, the fog surrounding him had lost its gray color, turning soft crimson and emitting an ominous glow. This glow seemed to grow stronger with each bloody cough and tremor that his body suffered. Brutal ravings began to lash his mind, worsening his condition even more. The voices that assailed him were a whole multitude, screams, cries, pleas, babbling, nothing made sense. Huff, huff, grrrr. Clenching his teeth and growling in pain, Adrian held his head and began to draw the sphere of light in his mind. Any thought of waking up left his mind. If the previous attack hadn't woken him up, then waking up of his own accord, as he used to do, was also impossible. Now he needed to go to the City of Calamities to escape whatever was attacking him. The sphere of light began to disappear, replaced little by the smoke-covered city. Just as it was about to manifest, a great darkness covered it, and Adrian found himself back where he had been. Forgive me, Master. But you have to endure this. Going to the temple would be harmful in your current state. A mysterious voice said out of nowhere. It was incredibly familiar. Lowering his blurred gaze to his body, Adrian saw in a daze how an illusory black tunic covered him, keeping him where he was. Hunter's Hallow. In disbelief, the dark-haired man could only grunt that before the pain lashed him with much greater force than before. This agonizing pain he was feeling now was too similar to the one he felt every time he was resurrected. His broken soul stretching or breaking as it was forcibly torn from the river Styx and returned to his body. He was now feeling that in the flesh. The two sensations were completely different. If the sensation of reviving was a violent wrenching, this one was a tortuous squeezing. It was as if something wanted to get out of him but something else kept it trapped. Arg. Cough. Adrian could only writhe on the floor, no longer able to scream, not unlike a snake that has fallen into a pit of boiling oil. He didn't know how long passed before everything stopped, but when he came to, he found himself out of the dream and lying on the floor of his room. It looked like he had moved around a lot in his sleep. The sheets and pillows were scattered across the floor. With slow movements, Adrian brought his trembling left hand to his face and touched it. Looking at his fingers, he was stunned to see how they were covered in sweat. He could feel all his clothes sticky and clinging to his skin, and he was very cold, incredibly weak and completely drained of energy. Huff. Huff. Was that an illusion? No. No, it felt too real. My body. I haven't felt like this since I faced the Rose School of Thought. What the hell was that? Blinking slowly to remove the spheres of light that covered his vision, the dark-haired man looked around weakly. Everything was still dark, and the crimson light coming through the cracks in the curtains indicated that it was still night. Thus, it couldn't have been long since he fell asleep. Looking down at his body, he noticed he was still in his Harvey Wayne guise. After confirming this, he took a deep breath and looked to the window. His spirituality fluctuated slightly when he saw the crimson light filtering through the curtains. The same lights that looked darker than usual. With more effort than usual, Adrian got up from the floor and walked shakily to the window of his room. Grabbing the curtain with his gloved right hand, he lifted it slightly to reveal the crimson outside. His eyes were immediately drawn to the dark sky. Unlike all the times he had seen it, tonight was different. Hanging in the black veil and completely exposed, without its dress of black clouds hiding it, was the crimson moon. This was a full moon, dark red like blood. Its entire surface seemed to be shining brighter than before. Adrian recognized this phenomenon. Although the previous owner of this body had seen it several times throughout his life, this was the first time he had seen it himself. Blood moon. The dark-haired man thought dazedly, the corners of his vision rapidly darkening. Thump! Adrian's body hit the ground with a thud. Tap tap tap. A soft but fast and constant tapping sounded in her room, bringing her out of her dream world and waking her up. Ugh! Growling a little, Flora lifted her eye mask until a tired gray eye was freed. Looking around, she frowned slightly. Taking off her mask and placing it on her bedside table, Jacob left the warm embrace of her bed. In her classic white nightgown, she grabbed her coat from the coat rack and put it on, tying the cord tightly around her waist and wrapping herself up a little. That done, she calmly walked to her bedroom window and opened the curtains. Standing on the frame outside was a simple blue-gray pigeon, unlike any other, its eyes intelligent. This was one of the princess's soldiers, Ignir, if she remembered correctly. Her brow furrowed a little at the sight of it, and she looked around suspiciously. Opening the window slightly, the disguised soldier entered. Before she could question what had happened, the pigeon came forward. "There's a problem with the sir." Flora immediately rushed to her door, almost ripping it off the frame as she left her room. Running down the silent and suddenly suffocating corridor in a blur, she quickly reached her partner's room. Pausing for a second and controlling her racing heart, the white-haired woman sighed slightly. While this could be dangerous, since she hadn't heard the soldier's last words, Flora wasn't worried that there was an enemy. With the number of warning systems in the department and eyes on it, she doubted anyone could enter here undetected, either by the princess or his soldiers. If there had been an enemy, Ignir would not have been so slow to warn and would have started immediately, even attacking by himself. He may have been a pigeon, but he still had some strength, could make noise, and could attract attention. Therefore, the problem was not that her partner was being attacked right now, but something unusual had happened that required another form of help. Grabbing the doorknob, she turned it and entered, her gray eyes drawn to the lying figure on the floor, face down, another pigeon pecking at his head to wake him up, but he did not react. The dove, another soldier, looked up and when he saw her, he saluted. "Miss." "Situation," Flora said sternly, kneeling next to her companion and turning him over, her eyes searching for any wounds. Precisely at 2:45 in the morning, Sir woke up. He was visibly affected and agitated. He walked around the room a little and fainted after looking out of his window. The pigeon responded with its raised wing while the woman continued her examination. Sweat covered her partner's body completely. He was breathing heavily and his face was furrowed in pain. He was extremely pale, as if a large amount of blood had been drawn from him. "He doesn't have any visible wounds." Flora narrowed her eyes. A curse of some kind? It didn't seem to be the case. As far as she knew, the princess had something that made it difficult to do anything regarding divination and cursing. It had to be something else. After reviewing the soldier's words, she quickly walked to the room's window and pulled back the curtain. Her eyes were drawn to the dark moon in the sky. A blood moon. Perhaps that caused some kind of reaction? The first thing that came to mind was the curse of the Abrahams, but that was impossible. The princess was not one of them. Whatever it is, it must be related in some way. Snapping her tongue a little, the woman closed the curtain and returned to her unconscious companion. Pigeon Ignir joined them at some point, and he too was trying to wake the man by pecking at his right hand along with the other pigeon. "He doesn't feel anything in that arm," saying with an exasperated sigh. Flora knelt next to the guy. Ignir and the other soldier stopped pecking and looked up at her. Looking at her partner's pale face, another sigh escaped her lips, one that had a faint trace of disappointment. Although she had always wanted to do this, she would have preferred to do it with the awake one. Raising her right hand high, she brought it down with all her strength against the man's cheek. Slap! His head turned violently to one side and black eyes opened wide. Erg! Holding a hand to his face, Adrian blinked, somewhat lost. His turbulent eyes focused on the figure with the white head sitting next to him. Blinking again, the figure cleared up to be that of his companion. "Can you get up?" Flora asked. Although she tried to hide it, she couldn't hide the pleasure in her voice. Oh, that felt much better than she thought. Adrian grunted a little and gave a weak nod from where he was on the floor. "I think so." "Give me a hand." "I thought so. You look awful," Flora said flatly as she took his left arm and helped him to his feet. "I feel worse," Adrian said gravely and dryly with his right hand on his forehead. His brain was killing him and he just wanted to go back to sleep. "Don't be a baby." With a little snort, the woman helped the man sit on his bed. "Well, are you going to tell me what happened to you?" she said with a raised eyebrow. Yes. Just give me a second." Sigh. Adrian sighed wearily as he grabbed the glove in his left hand and took it off. His face twisted a little and his true appearance returned. This caused one eyebrow to raise on Flora's face, followed by the other when the redhead began to take off his shirt. Coughing a little to avoid getting lost in that sweaty torso, Flora swallowed her sudden dry throat. "What do you think you're doing?" Her voice died down a little as she looked at the man's now naked torso. Her eyes focused on his arm. "Oh." Adrian traced the black cracks with his left hand. Before they barely reached his shoulder, now they had grown and reached a little above his right pectoral, almost to his neck. "Looks like I'll have to wear high necks from now on, huh?" Haha. Laughing softly, Adrian sighed and lowered his head slightly. In a few steps, the white-haired woman stood before him and began tracing the new cracks with one hand. "And now what is this? You're not going to break on me, are you?" Flora asked with her eyes slightly closed. Her fingers moved from his shoulder to his neck, careful and gentle. "Can you feel me? My touch?" At the touch, Adrian closed his eyes and let his worm do what it wanted. "Yes, luckily it's only in appearance." Flora murmured a little and after 8 seconds she moved her hand away. "Your body had a reaction to the blood moon a moment ago. Has anything like this ever happened before?" she asked calmly. "No, it's the first time." Opening one scarlet eye, he looked at her tiredly. The Jacob did not respond immediately. She frowned slightly. She doubted that the princess was lying to her, so there must be a reason, something that changed for this to happen. Using the information she had obtained along with what she knew from recent times, a possible truth was revealed to her. A slight grimace appeared as she thought about it. "You think it's because of what happened in the cave?" Adrian closed his eyes for a few seconds. Instead of darkness, a familiar memory greeted him, a dark cave with a floor covered in blood and a figure with red eyes standing over everything, an excessive smile on its face. Opening his eyes, he nodded. "It's a possibility, but I don't think it's the whole reason." The redhead doubted it was because of that strange charm they had used to trap him. Hunter's Hallow had protected him, so the possibility of that was low. The same when he died in that lake of blood, Hunter's Hallow had protected him from corruption just as the resurrection repaired all damage suffered. But that they were related in some way and played a role, of that he had no doubt. "But for the blood moon to do this to me." Adrian glanced sideways at the new cracks in his body, mistrust shining in them. In mysticism, people believe that the blood moon brings about the rise and eruption of negative emotions and strengthens the power of the underworld and spirit world. Even if the dead weren't summoned, they might still be able to climb out of their graves. Technically speaking, my soul is shattered to the point of being considered dead. Is it possible that the blood moon will raise my soul and that this is causing a reaction? Hunter's Hallow said it wasn't safe for me to go up to the temple in my condition. Maybe that was why. Because of the blood moon. The delicate state of my soul worsened to the point that going up to the City of Calamities was not safe? Maybe that's also why his scar got worse. His soul had tried to leave his body but the robe stopped it. It's a possibility. He had no idea how his soul or the robe were supposed to work. This was merely a hypothesis that could easily be wrong. Still, his mind couldn't help but return to the name Hunter's Hallow had used. It called the City of Calamities a temple. It's the first time I've heard of anyone, or anything, calling it that. Well, maybe it's another way to understand it. Sequence 0 of the pathways related to this Sephiroth are the Red Priest and Demoness. A temple falls into that range. Temple of Calamities. It makes more sense than city, although his favorite will always be the Closet of Calamities. Shaking his head, he sighed and looked at the floor with a lost look. Remember when I said my soul is delicate? I may have underestimated saying that. The right word is broken. Some blessings from my Lord hold it together but not repair it. The blood moon likely provokes a reaction in me that makes my soul want to leave. Raising his arm and pointing to the new cracks, he added, and this is the result. Flora looked at him in silence. Her gray eyes moved from his arm to his face twice. Will it happen again? Most certainly, Adrian sighed wearily, at least until my soul is healed, which I doubt will happen soon. He then laughed and smiled slightly. One of the soldiers woke you up, didn't they? Sorry about that. But don't worry, this isn't something that will endanger my life, so there's no need for you to come and look for me every time it happens. I'll have one of them keep guard in my room and he'll be able to help me every time this happens. He finished by closing his eyes, but the sudden sigh from his companion made him open them again. You really are a silly princess, Flora shook her head in utter disappointment. Your soldiers are much more useful keeping guard outside. It's better if they keep doing that and don't waste their time babysitting you. And you want to leave me alone to suffer in the nights with no one to look after me? Why, you're cruel, Adrian said, amused and tired. I never said you'd be alone, Flora said mischievously, and before the redhead could react, she pounced on him. Thump! His back hit the softness of the bed and two hands landed next to his head, forcing him to look up. From her position on top of the man, the white-haired woman smiled with mischievous, sparkling eyes. I stole you. Now you are my possession, princess, mine and mine alone. If I had to sleep with you every night to make sure you don't get killed by a little moonlight, I'll do it without hesitation. Flora laughed a little and added, I take very good care of what's mine, princess. Adrian looked a little dazed by this and couldn't help but smile wearily. Then I will be in your care, Miss Worm. Unable to even finish their game, the redhead could only say that before his eyes closed. His chest began to rise slowly, in a calm and serene rhythm, deeply asleep. Observing his sleeping face, Flora's smile faded in a small sigh. The woman extended her hand and squeezed the air a little. In the blink of an eye, the sheets and pillows on the floor appeared in her hand. Bored, she placed the man's head under the pillow. Flora then lay down beside the man and covered both with the sheet. As always happened when they slept together, arms wrapped around and held her gently. This guy is a complete cuddlebug, Flora gave a small sigh, her ears completely red. Although they had slept together several times before, this was the first time there had been so much skin-on-skin contact. I should have asked him to take a bath first. With every breath of air, the man's scent filled her lungs. To top it all off, his smell was stronger now. It wasn't a bad smell, but she'd be lying if she said her mind wasn't getting a little cloudy, in the bad sense of the word. Before her mind started to create scenarios, Flora quickly used cogitation to calm her state and help her fall asleep. Although, this isn't so bad. With that last thought from her slumbering mind, the world of dreams embraced her. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. Wayne Enterprise. Friday. It seems that Mr. Wayne had an interesting night. Archivist Beatrice said wearily, taking a large sip of her black coffee. One eyebrow raised in mild surprise. The rest of the people in the break room looked at her and nodded in agreement. Today the boss looked quite pale and visibly tired, although, Although there were no bags under his eyes, his gait was not as straight and energetic as usual. "Are you seriously going to talk about that now?" Eleanor cleared his throat, somewhat embarrassed. "Not much happens in this country. Anything to distract us is welcome. Books help, but people's drama will always be greater," librarian Clara said with a giggle and a strange, knowing smile. "And what's more tasty than a boss and his guard? Novels about that genre are my favorites," she added, laughing with a little more mischief. Last night was a blood moon. A study by the University of Wisdom proved that during this lunar phenomenon, animals and humans experience an increase in their need to mate. Arthur commented on the fact with curiosity. "And there's the answer as to why Mr. Wayne seems to have had several liters of blood taken from him." Clara let out another giggle. Oh, how she loved it when this happened. And so close to her, even better. They're always together and hardly ever apart. I also heard from the other workers that they live together, she whispered passionately, her eyes shining. "Oh, I can't wait to see their children running around here. If they take Miss Abigail's hair, I know they'll be adorable. Please let's not get ahead of ourselves. They're just starting to go out. Thinking about children so early would only damage the relationship." Thomas sighed a little. He had seen that happen many times in young couples. Couples who went too fast in the relationship, naming babies barely 2 days into it, only to end the relationship after a week or two. "It's never a bad thing to think about the future. Isn't that what we get up for every day?" Clara chuckled, adding selflessly, "Besides, it's relaxing to finally have a breather after the nightmare we went through." They didn't even dare say his name because of their resentment. Sighing slightly, Eleanor took a sip from her coffee cup and looked around. "At least we're free now, right? What's past is better left there, not souring our now. The current boss is paying us triple our salary. Even if we talk about the other one, he'll never ruin my day." Clara shook her head, her new laurel wreath gleaming in the room's light. Much of their clothing was like this, as was that of everyone present. They were all wearing new, good-quality clothes. As they were chatting, they saw a man entering the building through the break room windows, carrying a box from a nearby bakery with him. He went to the receptionist's desk to speak to the replacement. Knowing that this had become part of his responsibilities and having attended to the man once, Eleanor left the break room and made his way over. With a practiced smile, he greeted him. "Mr. Moriarty, it's good to see you again. What can I do for you?" The detective, who had seen him arrive, smiled like a gentleman. "Oh, Mr. Eleanor. I'm sorry to come at this hour, but I just wanted to drop something off." He held out the box in his hands towards him, a warm glow in his eyes. "For his help in a previous case, I wanted to bring this box of sweets as a thank you to Mr. Wayne. Would it be possible for you to deliver it for me?" What a nice guy. Not only does he have a good memory, but he's also very kind. Not seeing any problem with this, Eleanor took the box from his hands and said, "Of course, it won't be any trouble. But wouldn't you like to deliver it yourself? Right now Mr. Wayne is on his hour break. It won't be any trouble." "It's okay, I'm satisfied with this. I don't want to bother him any more than I have to." Sherlock Moriarty laughed a little and left after a few more pleasantries. Watching the man's bag disappear, Eleanor turned around. Greeting the replacement receptionist, he went up the stairs towards his boss's office. Calmly knocking on the door and receiving the all clear, he entered with the box of sweets. The first thing he noticed was his boss's tired look, just as his guard stared boredly out of the window. Seeing them, he couldn't help but remember what he had been discussing just a few moments ago and suddenly found the floor extremely interesting. "Yes, Mr. Eleanor?" Adrian asked calmly, his eyes on the box in the other man's hands. The smell of sweetness reached him there. He recognized that aroma along with the mark on it. A few blocks down there was a bakery specializing in sweets, specifically donuts. Nodding to his boss, Eleanor apologized for the interruption of the break time and explained further. "It's from Detective Sherlock Moriarty. He said it was a thank you for your help with the previous case." "Oh," Adrian raised an eyebrow. "You can leave it here, Mr. Eleanor. Thank you very much." The well-groomed man nodded and did as he was told, taking a few steps to his boss's desk and leaving the box before him. But, as soon as his hands released the box, the office door was knocked on quite forcefully and clearly in panic. More and more interesting things are happening. Giving permission to enter, curious about what it was, an agitated Arthur entered. I'm very sorry to bother you, Mr. Wayne, but a while ago a man arrived with the intention of investing in the firm on behalf of his employer. Miss Vivian is finishing up dealing with the transaction documents. I tried to detain the gentleman for a while, but he barely finished the investment and left. Investment? Adrian thought. Interested. His eyes looking sideways at his dear worm looking at everything with an expressionless gaze. She had said some time ago that she would make a small investment in the firm. Was this one of the many companies she had mentioned? Turning his attention to the person in charge of the firm's financial transactions and reports, he said, "Let me see it." Arthur nodded and, almost breathlessly, carefully took a check from his clothes and handed it to him. Curious about what could have caused such a reaction, he took the paper and looked at the number with a raised eyebrow. Arthur and Eleanor left the room a while ago, leaving the duo alone to deal with the bomb that was left there. Adrian didn't know how long he had been staring at the paper in his hands. He didn't even know if he had blinked. Mechanically but rustily, he turned to look at his partner, who was looking at the cloudy sky with false interest. "You said you would use a small company to invest in my firm. Didn't you?" he asked slowly. Flora turned bored. Oh, yes, I did. What's wrong? Is it a small amount?" Looking down at the check and the several zeros following the 6, Adrian again had to consider what he would say. He didn't think it would be this much, it was just, wow. Unable to help himself, he looked at her in amazement. "How much money do you have?" The Jacob smiled slightly, her eyes shining mysteriously. "It's just a minor company I invested in and made a hefty profit. There's no need to be so surprised, it's just pocket change." Adrian was honestly speechless. Klein will hear you say that this is just pocket change and go into a tachycardia. His eyes returned to the check in his hands and his lips tightened for a moment before he laughed in disbelief. "Well, at least I'll have the initial costs completely paid for." Although he wasn't worried about the money, this check was welcome. After all, 60,000 sasam was by no means a small amount. Only 6 times what he had paid for this firm. He carefully placed the check in his hands on his desk. He couldn't help but look curiously at his partner. "May I ask what this is for?" The smile on the woman's face became a little tense. The corners of her lips trembled. "I had an idea it would happen but I didn't think you would seriously forget it," Flora murmured as she held the bridge of her nose with 2 fingers. Adrian said nothing, just looked curiously at his partner who, after a few seconds, looked up again. She winked knowingly with a strangely gentle smile. "Consider it my gift to you." Then she added, "Happy birthday, princess." Oh. Opening and closing his mouth in a daze, the dark-haired man didn't know what to say. It had completely slipped his mind. What happened this morning was still a blur. Today is September 21st, the day this body was born. He had completely forgotten about his birthday. "So this thing Klein brought me is his gift." His eyes moved to the orange box next to him. He knew that comparing gifts was wrong, but damn it. The gift from the poor god paled completely in comparison to Flora's. "But the fact that he spent money buying me something is a huge gesture. Which is what you have to look at when you receive something." Adrian couldn't help but be a little lost at the ridiculousness of the situation. "If you're not going to say anything intelligent, keep it to yourself." Flora rolled her eyes in exasperation and, dragging her chair with a somewhat high-pitched noise, she got up. She placed her hands behind her back and stood in front of the man's table. Winking, one hand rose and with one finger pressed into the middle of the man's chest, who always looked her in the eye. "My birthday is October 31st. I expect a nice gift from you." "Yes." Adrian blinked once, then the corners of his lips rose. "You're rich. That makes the choice a bit complicated." Flora didn't take a second. "You're a clever princess. I'm sure you'll think of something." With that, her hand rose and she playfully patted the man's cheek twice before returning to her seat. It almost seemed like a trick, but Adrian could have sworn he saw her hips move ever so slightly. Knowing he had been ultimately defeated, the man raised his coffee cup in defeat, a soft blush adorning his cheeks. He would get her for this. There was no doubt about that. And with more than a month to prepare, he would have his revenge. Planning that, His hand reached out to where the box of sweets his guiding light had bought was, but he didn't touch anything. His eyes moved there, the box was gone, hee. Adrian rolled his eyes a little and, manipulating his threads, took the box back from the hands of the smiling Flora. If you want some, just ask. Besides, I need the sugar right now. Taking a donut before it slipped out of her hands, the woman winked, Fufu. You let your guard down, how could I not take advantage of that? With that, she bit into the donut, jam exploding in her mouth accompanied by the sweet taste of victory. Sighing a little at that, the dark-haired man opened the box. He noticed a small note folded up on top of the donuts. Grabbing it with a donut, he opened it and bit into it. Happy birthday. It only said that, it didn't even have a signature, but even so, a warm feeling rose in his chest. Ah Klein, you definitely make it hard not to love you, you lovely fool. With a little more free time, the days passed like the pages of an interesting book. The weekly team meeting came around again. With his true appearance in front of the bathroom mirror and his torso exposed, Adrian critically analyzed his body. Although a few days had passed since the blood moon, and he had already recovered, there was one thing that remained. The cracks had not gone away, they were still there. After a few seconds, he let out an unfunny laugh. I look like a vase that's slowly breaking. Although, maybe it's better to say collapsing? Adrian narrowed his eyes a little, thinking about what was happening to him. Every blood moon, my soul will try to leave my body, and Hunter's Hallow will force it to stay inside, but doing that also causes certain damage to my body. What will happen if the cracks spread until they cover me completely? Will I be a vessel glued together with the most dangerous glue in the world? Or will my body explode? How do I stop that? By healing my soul? But was it even possible? If not even the tunic made of the water of the river of eternal darkness could heal his soul, then what could? Given the current state of his soul, would his promotion to demigod affect anything, or would there be no change? Once one reaches sequence 4, their soul and body would undergo a change, making them stronger. Supposedly, that should help a little. Sigh. The nights have become much more dangerous for me. The blood moon can't be predicted when it will happen, so every night will be Russian roulette for me. Is this the way the divine whore gets her revenge? Fumbling around a bit, Adrian took one last look at his face. Luckily, his beloved worm had offered to keep an eye on him. It was self-imposed. But he wasn't complaining. At least sleeping with someone watching his back made it less worrying. Nodding, the redhead activated the faceless mode of creeping hunger and changed his appearance to a not interesting black-haired man. Soon, he would have to feed the glove, but he wasn't too worried about that. With that done, he left the bathroom while putting on a turtleneck. Grabbing the thick purple robes and putting them on, he left his room. If he wanted to get to the warehouse on time, he had to leave now, and he left his dear worm waiting for a long time. The worm in question looked at him with a raised eyebrow. She was wearing green robes with ribbons and a cape hiding her hair. I hope that in the time you made me wait you have thought of how you will convince them of this madness, she said, slightly exasperated. Adrian smiled mysteriously and gallantly extended his hand to the woman. Don't worry dear, I'm sure they'll accept. Flora just rolled her eyes and took the man's hand. The next moment, the shadows covered them, and they both disappeared from the room. On the sofa in the living room, Harvey Wayne and Abigail Rhodes were playing cards. Artyrose Street, Warehouse 7. Sorry about the delay. Adrian, with his black hair and an interesting face, laughed a little as he stepped out of nowhere, holding Flora's hand. He looked around and greeted those present. He could see Opera chatting with Sasha and Serena in their usual places. Ademisol was standing next to them, and Jerry was watching everything from her sofa. Zio and Furs were chatting to each other on the larger sofa. The writer sunk among the cushions while the sheriff maintained her elegance. Surprisingly, Charlotte was talking to Sharon and Marriage, showing them a basket from which several golden, dark, blood-colored charms protruded. The woman with the pale expression turned her attention from the basket to them. Welcome. Wraith Sharon greeted with a slight nod, her eyes taking on a certain sparkle at the sight of them together. Flora calmly released his hand, and her eyes focused on the young man with blue eyes next to Sasha. Adrian also saw this figure and walked over to him with a big smile. Nathan. Long time no see, my second favorite clown. How have you been? Second? Is there another one? Controlling his expression, the blue-eyed man smiled slightly at his boss, not recognizing him anymore but not finding it strange. He had already met people capable of changing faces, so the fact that the man could do it now came as no surprise. It's good to see you again, boss. I'm glad you're well. Smiling amusedly at the ever-respectful man, Adrian patted his shoulder with complicity and looked at the rest of the room's occupants. Well, I know you've already introduced yourselves a little, but let me repeat. This gentleman next to me is one of the first people I recruited, so treat him with love, Joking a little, he said, this is our friendly clown, Nathan Ram. Again, controlling the beating of his brow was something he hadn't missed to do. Nathan looked at those present, those he already knew, and those he didn't. Placing a hand on his chest, he slightly bowed. It's a pleasure to meet you all. With one introduced, Adrian patted his shoulder a couple of times and walked over to his beloved worm, who, as always, looked at everything with disinterest. Disinterest that quickly sharpened when she saw him arrive, and already knowing what he wanted to do, she changed the deck. Raising one hand slightly, she began to speak calmly. Although most of you already know me, a few still don't. I'm Flora Jacob, the Prometheus from Sequence 6. Having met her before, Sharon and Marich only gave a weak nod in return. On the other hand, Opera and Jerry greeted her with more enthusiasm. Another Sequence 6. Nathan couldn't help but swallow. There were a lot of strong people here. Sasha frowned slightly. Wanting to confirm her suspicions about the last few days, she quickly asked her question. Miss Flora, there was one thing I forgot to ask you the last time we met. Weren't you Little Hazel's former teacher? Restraining the urge to click her tongue, Flora sighed slightly. I was for a while, but that's the princess's responsibility now. Ah, no wonder your name sounded familiar. Sasha murmured slightly before laughing cheerfully. Hazel talked about you a lot. She said you taught her almost everything she knows about mysticism, her path, and the world. Having attended each of those talks more like a spectator watching an opera, Flora pretended not to know anything and closed her eyes. It wasn't a problem, she said, uninterested. As the conversation continued, Adrian turned and looked at the fish lying on the sofa. Miss Ryder, how was your Friday? Understanding what he meant, Furs nodded a little nervously. Very well, nothing happened. Zio looked at her best friend out of the corner of her eye and could only shake her head as she sighed with a bit of exasperation. The blood moon had come out of nowhere, and since there wasn't a full moon soon, they had been caught by surprise when it happened. Fortunately, Furs was already used to this, and after the initial panic, she prayed to the fool and fell into a sleep-like state where the effects of the moon no longer affected her. Having already accompanied the woman in several of these episodes, Zio only limited herself to caring for her until the blood moon passed. Will it be like this all her life? Zio asked calmly, but there was a certain regret in her voice. There's still a long way to go before this curse is lifted. Adrian sighed a little and patted the writer on the head without looking at her. All she has to do now is focus on digesting her potion and advancing to demigod as soon as possible. I'm not a cat. First pressed her lips together, but as always when this happened, she did nothing about it. Instead, she focused on the last part of his words, the curse will be lifted in the future. If she had heard this earlier this year, she was sure she would have go to celebrate by drinking and eating anything in the house. But now that she was receiving the help of a mysterious existence like the fool, the interest and emotion was less. And how are you two, Miss Casper? Mr. Zombie. Completely ignoring the woman's obvious pout, Adrian focused on the gothic duo. They looked good. The Temperance faction is to be applauded. He narrowed his eyes slightly. The word, good, was more like, fine. He could tell that Sharon was paler than usual, much paler almost to the point where her body was slightly transparent. Marich hadn't changed much, but his gaze had more malice than before, contained by an experienced will. We'll be fine. I'll just be weak for a few days, and I'll be back to normal. The pale wraith murmured, her voice a spectral whisper. The dark-haired man nodded solemnly. I'm still looking for the artifact to help with the effects of the blood moon. As soon as I have it, I'll give it to you. The Gothic duo just nodded in acknowledgement, saying nothing more. So this is the curse of the Beyonders of the Prisoner's Path. Sasha looked at this curiously, then nodded slightly. From the lessons she received from her boss and her short experience as an official Beyonder, she knew a little about the peculiarity of those who took that path. Adrian didn't delve into it, it was unnecessary. He looked at Serena, who smiled and offered a slight nod without removing her hands from her lap. She had changed her dress a little. Her clothes now consisted of dark reds and blacks, although from the first time he had seen her, she had always dressed modestly. Now, her robes were a little looser and included a hood. If asked, Adrian would say she looked like an ancient monastery monk. Of course, her clothes weren't as baggy, but he couldn't help thinking that. She is embracing the lessons that the monarch is giving her. Adrian smiled to himself. Although one of his soldiers was the one answering Skrina's prayers, he could still hear them. She had been praying a lot and the information she was receiving was quite rich, so it shouldn't take long for her potion to be digested. Tomorrow I have to get little son to get me the remains of a Forsaken. I'll also have to attend Miss I's party to ask for her blood, but that can wait. And now that he was thinking about potion materials, he couldn't help but think about his own promotion. Looking at everyone present, one by one, Adrian felt proud of himself. Including Vivian on the team, even though she was still on probation, he already had 14 members. I should also be able to count the Tarot Club. Not only am I giving the formulas to all of them, but I'm helping them as much as possible. With them, it would be 18. He was only 12 members short of completing all the requirements for his iron-blooded night ritual. His gaze fell on his beloved Worm, who was chatting a little with little Jerry. If I have a demigod on my team, will that count as a plus? Well, their status is suppressed, so I don't even know if that would count. Will the soldiers I take out of the closet for the ritual count? Technically, I give them life with my spirituality. The amount I pour being how strong they will be, so it's possible. If so, the missing members could be the soldiers, although how strong I can make them without risking my promotion requires experimenting. And how many can I get out after one advance to Reaper? Adrian let his mind dance curiously before rolling his shoulders. Honestly, he wasn't worried about the missing 12. They would come naturally, just as the others had come. Sighing internally and putting those thoughts aside, Adrian spoke, looking at everyone present. How are you doing with the digestion of your potions? Depending on how close you are, I will gather the ingredients or look for the formula for your promotions. Jerry and Ademisol don't count. Quickly adding, he looked expressionless as the girl pouted and the boy looked at the floor disappointedly. Laughing a little at the reaction of the little ones, Sasha raised a hand. Not much change from last time, boss. My potion is close to being digested. I should be ready by mid-October. Nathan, who had raised a hand, looked at his partner in surprise and muttered dazedly, "That fast? I'm barely halfway through." The giant turned and looked at him with even more disbelief. 2 months in the circus, and you only digested half of it. What were you doing? At this point, his control over his face began to fail, and with trembling lips, Nathan defended himself. I haven't found my acting rules yet. Okay, it's not as easy as it sounds. Taking advantage of the distraction they had caused, Fers looked at her friend next to her. How's your potion going? I'm still only halfway through. I'm halfway, too, Zio replied with her arms crossed. Fers froze. She leaned towards the blonde and whispered in disbelief. But you barely advanced a month ago. How did you do it? An eyebrow rose, and the sheriff said matter-of-factly, by trying hard to act, of course. You should try it. Boom. The trickmaster felt as if one of her trick bombs had exploded in her stomach, her eyes glistening with pain. She muttered, not you too. I'm doing my best, you know. First, that lunatic, now her soul sister, betrayal. Zio closed her eyes. I don't know what to tell you then. It's not fair. First pouted. Rolling her eyes slightly under her eyelids. Zio did not even open her eyes and gently tapped the writer on the forehead with her finger. Ouch. Not giving her time to complain, the shorter woman opened her eyes. Don't be a child. It's possible that it's because of the acting in advance that Kenway told us before. I was always acting like a sheriff in East Borough, So that must be why I'm digesting the potion faster than you. Oh, so that's what it was. The trickmaster muttered with a frown before snorting indignantly, it's not fair. Observing the interaction between the two expressionlessly, Flora looked at her partner on the other side of the room and moved her lips in a secret message. Are you sure they're not gay? Her lips said, PRR? Not expecting the message, Adrian covered his mouth tightly, trembling slightly from the laughter that wanted to escape. Not wanting to explode, he quickly spoke, let me know when you're close to digesting it, miss. Remember that I have the ingredients for your next potion. Narrowing her eyes at the suspicious attitude, Zio only nodded, I will. I still have a long way to go before I digest my potion. Adrian, Opera entered the conversation with a somewhat disappointed tone. Don't worry, we're all different. You don't have to feel bad about what you lack. Opportunities to act as a planter are not very easy to find. The dark-haired man shrugged. Of all the paths in this room, he was sure that Opera's was the second least likely to give opportunities to act. The first one, obviously, is that of Marich and Sharon. With that thought, he turned to look at the young man with purple eyes. What about you, Charlotte? You're a little quiet. The second youngest man in the group sighed slightly. I'm fine, boss, but it's going a little slower than I'd like. Despite the help Miss Sasha is giving me, I still have a long way to go. The core of the melee scholar was the study of anything related to melee with a certain degree of depth. It was not just about the correct movement but also about the reason for it and the philosophy behind it. To digest the potion, pugilist Sasha was helping him, but the process was naturally slow. Same as Opera, don't worry too much about it. That said, Adrian looked at Serena, who smiled happily. I'm already on the verge of completely digesting my potion. Mr. Kenway, I'm sure I'll be ready to advance by the end of this week or the next. Miss Serena, are you already a Beander? What pathway? Jerry looked the woman up and down, curiosity shining in her gray eyes. She had noticed that she was happier than usual, but she didn't think that was why. The older woman smiled a little, clasping her hands under her stomach and interlocking her fingers. She closed her eyes and said peacefully, I'm sorry, but that's a secret. The little one tilted her head to one side. Jerry, don't bother Scrana. No one is obliged to say which pathway they are. Adrian sighed. Come here, you two, a demisol. Why? Jerry asked with a little smile as a demisol was already moving. Adrian looked at her flatly. Don't make me go for you. Yes, sir. Delta bowing their heads, the girl and the boy stood before the man, both looking up at him. Ignoring the cute sight, the dark-haired man said with one hand on his hip, who will go first? Choose quickly. Me. Jumping with excitement, Jerry raised her hand and waved it happily. A demisol opened his mouth a second too late and could only sigh. You'll have better luck next time. Adrian patted the young man on the head, who closed his eyes. At this, Jerry's pout returned. Children. Rolling his eyes in amusement, he took his hand away from the boy's head and calmly walked to the free table at the back of the room. The little spectator followed him closely, already knowing what was coming. Taking various ingredients from his robe, Adrian prepared the sacrificial ritual to pray to the Scarlet Monarch. So the boss really is the follower of a hidden god. Nathan watched what the man was doing with slightly pursed lips. Even though Sasha had already told him this and there was no problem, he couldn't help feeling a little uncomfortable. Noticing his discomfort, the giant only laughed a little and wrapped an arm around the clown's shoulder. Grabbing the ingredients for the telepathist potion and putting away the robot ingredients, Adrian watched as the little girl prepared her potion. Although excited about advancing to Sequence 8, Jerry did not let her emotions affect her actions. Having let her emotions take control had almost caused her to die in Eastborough many times, so she knew how to control herself. Calmly, she first put together the secondary ingredients for the telepathist potion. The 100 milliliters of purified water went in first, followed by the 5 grams of chestnut spore, 8 grams of dragontooth grass powder, and the 3 pure white elf flowers petals. Once those were poured in, the main ingredients were added. The complete pituitary gland of the rainbow salamander and 10 milliliters of the spinal fluid of a Farsman rabbit. Before she knew it, All the ingredients had melted. Only a bluish-black liquid remained in the bowl, with glimmers that seemed to shine from the depths of its heart. Without changing her expression, she turned and looked expectantly at her boss. Taking his trusty mirror from his clothes and performing a short divination even though he already knew the result, Adrian nodded to the girl. "Good work. When you're ready, you can drink it." Restraining the corners of her lips from rising, Jerry returned her attention to the potion. Closing her eyes, she went into cogitation to be in the best possible state to drink it. 20 seconds later, she opened them and filled one of the 2 cups that were there. She didn't hesitate and raised it to her lips. Gulp, gulp, gulp. Keeping his thoughts to himself and having already experienced the ravings once, Jerry focused on waiting. After a few minutes, the girl opened her eyes. Slowly, the corners of her lips rose, and her crystalline gray eyes looked at her hero. "I am a telepathist now." Adrian nodded and patted her head in praise. "Yes, you are. Now go and sit down to deal with the overflowing spirituality. Once a demisol advances, I have an announcement to everyone." With her new eyes and improved sight, Jerry saw many things. Now, she could read the superficial thoughts of others and, to a certain degree, simulate the trajectory of such thoughts. Thanks to these enhancements, she could see that the man was excited about whatever he was about to say. "This will be fun." Laughing innocently, she nodded and ran over to Opera's side, who greeted her with a smile. Monster Ademisol approached the man, his black eyes looking at the materials where the ingredients for his potion were. Adrian had taken them out this morning to let them breathe, so he wasn't worried that the City of Calamity's aura would affect them. Since the boy showed no reaction, everything worked as it should. With that said, he grabbed the ingredients for the robot potion. The formula quickly passed through his mind. Main ingredients: Southern Varano's brains and 15 milliliters of oiled Rusk's venom. Supplementary ingredients: 50 milliliters of purified water, 10 grams of oxidized iron, 10 drops of old oil, 3 grams of sulfur powder, and 3 seeds of the bitter apple. Adrian grabbed another clean cup with the revised formula and placed it on the table. Although you saw how Jerry made the potion, you haven't yet received the proper lesson for that, so this time, I will prepare your potion and show you how it's done. If you have any questions, ask. This is the time for that, understood? Yes. Ademisol nodded deeply. His eyes did not move from what he was doing. Taking his time so that the boy would not get lost, Adrian explained the correct way to make a potion and how to tell if it was right, although, in the boy's case, he explained that it was better for him to be guided by his intuition for that. Once the class was over, he poured all the contents into the last clean cup. The robot's potion was a metallic copper. Its texture and appearance resembled a high-quality engine oil. "Well?" He held out the cup to the young man. Ademiswal's eyes did not leave the cup and darkened a little. Listening to his intuition, he took it from his hands. "It's okay." Closing his eyes, Ademisol raised it and began to take long sips. Gulp. Gulp. With the boy's promotion over and with him sitting next to Jerry, both eating a chocolate cookie that Opera had given them, Adrian stood up in front of everyone. But before he could say anything, the planter stopped him and went to Charlotte's office. After a moment, she returned carrying a large cake with several lit candles. "Clap, clap, clap, happy birthday to you." Opera began to sing with a smile, followed by everyone else as they began to clap. "Oh, monarch." With a blush quickly forming on his cheeks, Adrian could only stand there, frozen. If there was one thing he didn't know how to deal with, it was being sung to. "Happy birthday to you." Flora joined in, too, with an extremely pleased smile and shining eyes. Her hands even seemed to collide with the same mischief as she clapped. "Not you too." Oh, he knew that now she knew that he didn't like this. "Please let it end already." Stopping before him, Opera smiled and held the cake toward his face. From what he could smell, it was chocolate. In the center, it said, "Happy Birthday," in big red letters. 23 candles surrounded it. "Sorry, boss, we didn't know how old you were, so we put on the ones we thought were right." She apologized a little sheepishly. "I said you were 25. Sasha raised a hand, faced with the situation's ridiculousness and still feeling extremely embarrassed. Adrian couldn't help but laugh a little. I'm 21. Hey, you guys got it close, at least. He joked, looking at the cake. Thank you, really, he smiled warmly. You guys didn't have to do this. You know that, right? You've helped us a lot and even saved our lives, some of us several times. It's the least we could do. Opera smiled back. Go on, make a wish, boss. Nathan clapped. You guys, seriously. Closing his eyes and shaking his head, the redhead sighed with false exasperation and grabbed his left glove. Well, if I had to make a wish, I'd better do it with my face, right? With that, he took off creeping hunger. After a short transformation and growing a few centimeters, the red-haired Adrian Kenway stood before everyone. Letting his hair down, he bent down a little and blew. All the candles went out. Clap, clap, clap. Laughing a little more, Adrian shook his head, amused. That was stupid, but I really appreciate the gesture. Thank you very much, seriously. We're glad to hear that. He reached under the cake and smiled. Would you like a piece? Do you really need to ask? With a small plate and fork in hand, Adrian crossed one leg from his chair and began to eat. I knew you made cookies, but I wasn't aware that you also baked. When did you learn that? The chocolate cake tasted great. This couldn't be learned overnight. During my time at the Earth Mother Church, the Father taught me several recipes for cooking. This cake is one of them, along with the cookies I usually make. Opera remembered those days fondly. Although he looked terrifying, it was only on the outside. Father Utravsky was very kind. Many of the world's most famous bakeries are believers of the Earth Mother. Flora remarked as she ate her cake sitting next to him. How come you don't know that? The redhead shrugged, taking another piece to his mouth. I didn't get out of the orphanage much. Besides, I've always been more into the occult. You're weird. Thanks, Kenway, although I know we're having a good time chatting. Zio joined the conversation, her own plate in hand. What was that you wanted to say before? It had been a month since her crazy friend had given an announcement. If he had one now, it couldn't be good or simple. With that in mind, she refused to let it pass like that. Oh, right. Well, once they started singing, I didn't want to ruin the atmosphere, so I decided to wait a while. Adrian looked at his fork and cake with interest, but now that we're quiet, it's a good time. Sigh. Flora shook her head, eating her cake in silence. Looking at everyone present, the redhead smiled happily. I hope you enjoyed your month off, because soon we're going to hunt a demigod. Furs, who was finishing eating her third slice, froze halfway through her bite. Mechanic and very rusty, she turned to look at him in disbelief. We are going to do what? As if you were discussing the weather, Adrian replied casually, hunt a demigod. Now completely rusty, she turned her torso to look at the rest of those present, to confirm whether it was her ears playing tricks on her or whether that crazy guy really said what she heard. All those present, without exception, showed varying degrees of disbelief, shock or bewilderment. Even the youngest, the least experienced, showed this because although they did not know precisely what a demigod was, they could understand its power. Beyonders who transcend human limits and acquire divinity are considered fundamental forces in any organization, orthodox or not. They were going to hunt one? This could not be taken lightly? Kenway, do you understand what you're saying? Do you know what that means? Zio unconsciously placed her hand on the hilt of her sword, something she did in moments of stress. The redhead nodded usually. Quote. A vein jumped on her forehead, and a little of the edge of her sword showed, but Furs placed a Furs, who was finishing eating her third slice, froze halfway through her bite. Mechanic and very rusty, she turned to look at him in disbelief. We are going to do what? As if you were discussing the weather, Adrian replied casually, hunt a demigod. Now completely rusty, she turned her torso to look at the rest of those present, to confirm whether it was her ears playing tricks on her or whether that crazy guy really said what she heard. All those present, without exception, showed varying degrees of disbelief, shock or bewilderment. Even the youngest, the least experienced, showed this because although they did not know precisely what a demigod was, they could understand its power. Beyonders who transcend human limits and acquire divinity are considered fundamental forces in any organization, orthodox or not. They were going to hunt one? This could not be taken lightly? Kenway, Do you understand what you're saying? Do you know what that means? Zio unconsciously placed her hand on the hilt of her sword, something she did in moments of stress. The redhead nodded usually. A vein jumped on her forehead, and a little of the edge of her sword showed, but first placed a hand on hers and gently lowered it without even looking at her.
Boss, is this even a good idea? It's a demigod. Sasha nervously entered, and Nathan nodded next to her.
I still want to live, in case it wasn't obvious. Charlotte scratched his neck hard, a nervous laugh, filling it. Opera, Jerry, and Ademisal looked at everything in confusion. They had the least experience of this world, so they didn't quite know how to react. They only knew it was a bad idea. Coming out of her momentary stupor, Sharon tilted her head almost imperceptibly to one side and said, "Mr. Adrian, could you tell us more about this hunt you want to do?" "Of course, that's what I was getting at." The redhead rested his chin on his palm and explained the current situation.
"A few days ago, an imperative mage from the Tamara family prayed to my lord for help. In case you don't know, the Tamara family is an angel family from the 4th epoch of the Tudor Empire. They have managed to survive until today by hiding, but they have suffered several fragmentations that caused several branches to turn to evil gods. This demigod is part of the last righteous line of the family according to his words, but this dying branch is being hunted by the corrupted branches that separated. Tomorrow, I'm going to have a chat with him. Depending on how it goes, we'll help him face his pursuers." Imperative mage. Which path is he from? Charlotte asked curiously but no longer so nervously. Sequence 4 of the Arbiter pathway. Zio jumped at that, a demigod of my path.
The Tamara family controls the Arbiter path. I'm aware that they possess formulas up to sequence 2 at least. Adrian smiled. Very juicy, don't you think? Rolling his shoulders, he continued somewhat indifferently. But it all depends on the information he gives me tomorrow. The possibility of an enemy demigod is high, and he won't come alone, so once I confirm the information, I'll need your help dealing with the mosquitoes. I'll tell you your roles once that happens. Until then, make sure you get a good rest.
I hope you know what you're doing, Marich growled a little, his gaze more intense than before. The smile on the redhead's face sharpened dangerously, and his eyes sparkled. Of course I do, Marich. Who do you take me for? Besides, it's just a demigod. Just a demigod, says this madman. Furs murmured with a lost look in her eyes.
Although she was much calmer now, knowing that they would have the support of another demigod, she was worried that this guy was so casual about killing one. Don't be a crybaby. Giggling, Adrian took another bite of his cake.
It tasted much better now. Playing with his fork a little, he focused on a still-stunned Opera. Opera, I'll come for Ademisal in a few days to have him work at my company so he can act as a robot. In the meantime, please change his appearance a little. Dye his hair and teach him how to apply a little makeup. It should be easy for him to learn that now that he's a robot, but let me know if there are any problems.
Ah. Yes. No problem. Opera nodded, and the young man in question nodded in return. I promise to learn quickly, Ademisal said, looking at everyone, before this short but no less exciting party meeting would end. Adrian gave one last announcement.
Hazel should be joining us this week. The new member's trial period is also coming to an end.
If nothing happens, that barbarian will soon be official. At the last meeting, he had already discussed Vivian's future recruitment, so this announcement was not strange to anyone, it only confused Nathan a little more. With nothing more to do or say, after eating most of the cake and Sasha taking away what little was left, the group members left Warchow's 7 in their respective groups. After a while, only Adrian, Flora, and Serena remained in the room.
The latter did not move to leave. She just looked around the room for a moment.
Her sensitive spirituality as a secret supplicant allowed her to detect particular hidden existences as well as hidden presences. A while ago, her spirituality had sent a sudden reminder. A freezing morning breeze that disappeared as soon as it appeared. Something came in here quickly, very quickly. Squinting her eyes, she turned her attention back to the seated duo.
There's someone else here. Hearing the words he longed to hear, the corners of his lips turned up.
Without looking anywhere, Adrian spoke into the air mischievously, it's rude not to introduce. Yourself once your name is called, don't you think?
At his voice, the shadows under one of the tables darkened even more and began to weep as if they had become a black sea.
From that black sea, a part of it separated and rose, forming a person who had a serious look on his face. A familiar man from Bayam Ascent with deep brown eyes accentuated by slight dark circles under them and short black hair. You can't help getting into trouble, can you, Mr. K? He said with a small sigh. The person who had been in charge of introducing him to the tower and guiding him through it more than a month ago. Mysticism Magister Euron Maltier. I didn't think he was also part of the team watching me. But it makes sense. Someone who has been watching me for so long is the best person to guide me. Adrian concealed his slight surprise at this.
He chuckled, I didn't think you were my babysitter. How have you been, Mr. Euron? The Mysticism Magister gave a disinterested nod in response but said nothing more. Facing those present, he walked to one of the chairs in front of them and sat down. His posture could not be described as anything other than perfect.
Euron looked at him with calm eyes. So far you have not given us any problems integrating into Lenberg. Although not using a very discreet profile, you have managed to hide well. May I ask why the interest in breaking that calm?
Just because I'm keeping a low profile doesn't mean I'm not playing my cards, Mr. Euron. Adrian smiled mysteriously at the man.
Turning to his side, his smile softened. It's okay, Serena, you can go. I'll take it from here. The woman gave a slight nod and left the room without saying anything else. Flora watched this expressionless interaction. This was what worried her. Although she had reservations about Adrian planning to hunt a demigod, something she still couldn't quite process, for now that was only a possibility, so there was no need to worry yet. Her genuine concern was the wise Oas. They were being watched all the time by them. The moment when they were most attentive was undoubtedly on the days when everyone got together.
Once the princess told them what she wanted to do, the wise owls would undoubtedly react and want to obtain more information about it.
She didn't know all the information. The princess had kept the most important thing to himself for that reason, only telling her that he planned to do something and that he needed to talk to the church about it. Knowing the man very well, Flora was sure it was another one of his crazy ideas. A very big one if he needed to talk to the church first. She had tried to think of what it could be, but even in her wildest thoughts, hunting a demigod was one of the least likely. The first problem they had to overcome was to convince the wise owls to let him do this madness. In response to their words, Euron nodded slightly in acknowledgement. I suppose it was our mistake to think that you would just be an entrepreneur. You said that, not me. Adrian chuckled. So, what do you think of what I want to do? I think you have an enormous desire to die, Mr. K, Euron sighed. Then his gaze hardened, and he said, I don't need to tell you that the church cannot afford a confrontation between two demigods here in the city. The destruction and loss of life that would bring is unacceptable. You say that as if I planned to confront a demigod in the middle of the street. Adrian sighed, bored and disappointed. Have you forgotten what path I follow? I am a conspirator of the hunter pathway. Choosing prey to hunt is my bread and water. I would never choose prey that I cannot kill. Euron's eyes trembled a little. To call a sequence 4 Beander prey is to underestimate their existence as high sequence, Mr. K. To underestimate existences that have already surpassed the human plane will only lead you to an Carly grave. Leaning his cheek against his knuckles, the redhead raised an interested eyebrow. They may have divinity in them, but you must also remember that they are still mortal. They have to eat and sleep to live, in the same way that they still age, only much more slowly. They also bleed, and anything that bleeds can be killed. Asterisk. Euron said nothing in response. He just closed his eyes and let out a muffled sigh. After a few moments, he opened them. How exactly do you plan to deal with this enemy demigod? It is obvious that he will have the support of others. But even so, once someone reaches sequence 4, they become very difficult to kill. With enough preparation, there is no one you can't kill. Adrian laughed a little. Besides, how will I do it? Why do I have to tell you? I'm a conspirator. If I go around telling everyone who asks me what I'm planning, I'll fail like one. Flora felt one eyebrow twitch but controlled her expression. Her eyes shifted slightly, and she looked annoyed at her partner's back. You're making it harder for them to help us, you idiot. For a moment, Euron's expression twisted into a grimace. Then, he assumed his role as a reader and separated himself from the scene, regaining his composure. With a solemn voice, he said, "If you wish to receive the help of the church then." "Help?" Adrian cut him off with a raised eyebrow. "Who said I needed your help?" Stunned, Euron expressed his confusion. "Isn't that why you said all that in this meeting with your team? To ask for our participation in this?" Adrian snorted as if he had heard the funniest thing in his life. "Please, don't get too excited. I didn't say that to ask for your help." "You didn't? Then why?" Flora shared the same thought, but knowing the redhead, she thought she had an idea why. And she didn't like it at all. Adrian smirked. "I said it so you don't get in the way. This is my prey, after all." Opening and closing his mouth, the wise owl was stunned. Not waiting for him to recover, the redhead continued, "The most I'll say is that it will be in the Lumia forest. I'll give you the exact location the day it happens, but don't think it's to help. The only reason I'm giving you this information is for your own peace of mind, so that you can assess the situation and intervene if you see fit, but unless it is absolutely necessary, you will stay where you are, like good little boys and girls. Is that clear?" Returning to the reader's state, Euron stared blankly at the man, although his eyes trembled slightly. "I will notify the church of your words and information. They will make the final decision." Adrian nodded without interest. "I am sure they will accept before the end of the day. Before I forget, I want you to stop watching me for the duration of this hunt. If your noses are digging around my kitchen, you risk ruining my plan." Euron only nodded in agreement with his words, his expression indecipherable. His body faded colors, and the shadows quickly covered him, caving a very dark figure. This dark figure collapsed all over the floor, merging with the shadows under the tables, completely indistinguishable. Now that they were alone, Flora turned and looked at him with evident annoyance. "Having their help would have been very useful. I won't deny that, but it's not necessary. The most important thing they have to do is observe and ensure the situation doesn't escalate. Otherwise, they would have just been a nuisance. What am I going to do with you?" Knowing there was no going back, the white-haired woman could only resign herself. Not wanting to be in that hole longer than necessary, she changed the subject a little. "Shall we wait here for his answer?" "Yep. Once we receive the yes, we'll move." A while later, a reminder of their spirituality made the duo look at a table at the back of the room. On top of it, a white letter sealed with the symbol of the church was resting. Using his threads, Adrian pulled it towards his hands and opened it. He began to read by extending it in front of him so that his dear worm could see it too. "We accept the terms. But if we are forced to intervene, all the spoils of this hunt will pass into the hands of the church. Finally, any damage to the forest will be yours to repair. Sincerely, Archbishop Thaddeus von Hohenberg." Smiling, the redhead burned the letter and threw the ashes in the tray in the corner. "Come on, we have a train to catch." After leaving the train station, the duo went to the deepest parts of the Tuan to rent a room, where they spent the night. They woke up at dawn on Monday and began preparing for the talk with the demigod of the Tamara family. "Are you going to have this meeting looking like that?" Flora asked curiously from where she was sitting on the bed. Even in the darkness, her white hair was noticeable. This time, she was wearing hunting clothes, a shirt and pants along with black boots and a windbreaker. "When I talk to him, I will use my real appearance. Anything else would make him think that my lord is not considering his request." Adrian sighed softly. His face had remained largely unchanged. It was the same as the one he had worn the day before going to the warehouse. If he could get another soldier out of the closet of calamities, he would use them to attend in his place, but for his current self, that was impossible. Nor could he use the two he could already get out because they were now acting like themselves back at Wayne Enterprises. Since it was likely that what he planned to do would cause a bit of a stir, he had to separate the person of Harvey Wayne as much as possible from the problems. If the people of Gotham were told that Bruce Wayne is Batman, they would just laugh at how ridiculous it is. Harvey Wayne can't be behind in that respect. With a thought, a stain emerged from his shadows and quickly climbed up his legs to his bicep, then it wrapped around it, and the burnt band appeared.
With the rap pounding his now accustomed brain, he looked amusedly at his partner.
Are you going to stay here, or will you join me in this? The corners of Flora's lips rose as she did. With bright gray eyes shining like stars, she looked at him with mock offense. If they kill you, someone has to get your body out of there, she said mockingly. How kind of you, joking a little. Adrian held out his hand, and Flora took it. In the next second, the shadows enveloped them and merged with the shadows of the dark room, disappearing.
Several shadows leaping in quick succession took them to the edge of the town, next to the forest, where they continued on foot, with the dark-haired man leading a step ahead.
As they moved, the conspirator took the opportunity to analyze the environment with a critical eye. It was clear that the efforts to keep the forest alive yielded fruit. The deeper they went, the more alive and thicker the trees became, and human activity, if it was already scarce, was non-existent.
Like a hunter, Adrian could only feel extremely comfortable in this kind of environment.
There were many places to hide, set traps, prepare ambushes, and attack. The terrain made it difficult to move around comfortably, which was also beneficial for combat. A smile began to form on his face. At least you're taking this seriously, Flora said, noticing that, if you didn't have a plan at this point, I would think that a useless one replaced my princess. If we're going to hunt such juicy prey as this, the foundations must be thought out extremely carefully on. It's the minimum one must have. Adrian turned to look at her as they continued walking, a knowing smile on his face.
And you, depending on what we find out today, my dear worm. You are the most important piece of my plan.
A white eyebrow raised with suspicion. I doubt that's a good thing. The dark-haired man winked as he removed creeping hunger from his left hand. Don't worry, it's completely safe. As his height and musculature increased, his hair lengthened and returned to its red color, he held out the dangerous glove to the woman. Here, change your face with this. It took a moment, but Flora understood what the man wanted to do.
A knowing smile formed on her face as she took the glove and placed it on her left hand. When the talks with the rest of the family begin, we can't have this guy recognizing me.
Good idea. Flora Jacob has been seen hanging out with Harvey Wayne. She cannot be seen helping Adrian Kenway. When this demigod of Tamara's family begins his talk with the hermits of fate in the future, he will no doubt mention what will happen here. Being demigods of the Marauder pathway, André Zoroast and Fiorella Jacob would easily join the nails and deduce that Harvey Wayne is Adrian Kenway's secret identity. Something that her princess didn't want to happen, like herself. The redhead didn't comment on it, he just winked and turned his attention back to the front. Flora said nothing more either, after trying a little and finding the right finger. Her hair quickly turned raven black and lost its curl, becoming straight. Adrian looked at this change and couldn't help feeling a little disappointed. One of the things he loves most about his worm is her curly white hair, and seeing it change was painful. A fleeting thought crossed his mind, and his eyes widened. I wonder if this is how Flora feels whenever I change my appearance. Well, he didn't like changing his appearance either. He never felt completely comfortable with it, which increased his respect for the seers a little more. Pretending to be someone you're not didn't sit right with him. That's why his attitude from identity to identity did not change. The same thought he had many times before repeated itself in his mind, but this time, it resonated in his heart and the depths of his broken soul. He felt that now he truly understood what it meant. I will always be Adrian Kenway, nothing will change that. With those words resonating inside him, they continued on their way in a comfortable and peaceful silence. Arriving at a clearing where a fallen tree stood, the redhead walked over to it and sat down. Raising one leg and hugging it with his knees, he looked in front of him with serene eyes.
How long do you think it will take? Flora asked, standing next to him but not sitting down.
He should be here in a while. If you want to sit down and rest, I'll know when he's close. Adrian raised his left hand and moved his fingers like spiders. To the naked eye, they were empty, but from his fingertips, almost invisible threads emerged and stretched out towards the forest.
All along the way, he had left some threads that, once broken, he would be able to feel them.
With the complete digestion of his conspirator potion, the range of this mutant ability had grown from a radius of 50 meters to one of 75. His control has significantly increased as well. Patience is something I have plenty of. I can wait a little longer. The Jacob said calmly, and this time, she sat down next to him, her now black eyes looking out across the clearing. The redhead only nodded slightly and closed his eyes, focusing on feeling his threads while extending many more throughout the clearing. Artelia District, Circus of the Masked Ones. Wall looked at herself in the mirror in her booth and could only sigh a little. Just a few minutes ago, her performance for the day had finished, and now she was getting ready to go home to prepare for the Tarot Club. On Mondays she only did one performance in the morning so she could seek inspiration on her sofa in the remaining hours. Knock knock. There was a soft tap on her door and she could feel her spirituality reacting a little. At that moment, someone opened the door and entered the room without the door being opened. This was an older man, somewhat stooped. His face was marked by several wrinkles, which seemed to be in an eternal expression of tiredness. His eyes were blue. "Forgive my manners, young lady, but I couldn't bear to continue watching your performance without doing something about it." The man bowed slightly. Furs controlled her expression, narrowing her size at the man and taking a step back, following the script. "Who are you?" she asked suspiciously. The old man looked down a little and smiled. Furs noticed something peculiar in that smile. It was a smile full of experience and tired, very tired. "I'm just a kind old man who no longer wants to see young people die," he said with a sigh. "You still have a lot to live for. I ask you to please leave the circus and escape the country while you still have the chance." "I'm sorry, sir, but I can't do that," Furs said with conviction, her eyes burning with emotion. "As I still have a lot to live for, I must continue here and not stop." The man's pupils trembled a little before a sigh that dictated a long life left him. "I already assumed that." He looked her in the eyes and said, "Forgive my manners again. I'm old, and I easily forget things. I'm Alan Campbell. Could I ask for your name?" Furs kept her mouth shut for a moment before giving a weak nod. "Livia Storm. What do you want, Mr. Allen?" "For children to live long lives," Alan said honestly. "You may not trust me now, but I only want the best for you. If you would allow me to help you, I would be very grateful." Alan paused momentarily before continuing. "As you have seen, I have the same abilities as you. 2. I'm a Beyander of the apprentice pathway. If you give me the opportunity, I can help you on this painful path." The woman's eyes opened a little. "Do you also suffer from the ravings of the full moon?" A sad smile settled on the old man's face. "That's right, all my life in fact. I can't solve that problem. I'm very sorry about that, but at least I can help you not to die from it." She pressed her lips together momentarily, conflict visible on her face. Seeing this, Alan calmly raised a hand. "Don't worry, miss. I don't expect you to answer now. I can wait a few days." He took a folded piece of paper from his pocket and handed it to her. "When you have an answer, please come to this place on Friday." Furs took it without saying anything, she just nodded slightly. Alan placed a hand on his chest and bowed slightly. "Have a nice day, Miss Livia. I'm very sorry to have bothered you again." After those words, Alan Campbell turned and walked through the closed door like a ghost. Furs stared at the door without saying anything for a while. After counting 5 minutes, her lips slowly lifted into a small smile. She held the folded note with 2 fingers to the mirror and waved it like a trophy. "Mission accomplished," Furs said victoriously. In the mirror, there was no reflection of her. Instead, a woman with blonde hair and cold blue eyes who wore dark robes. Wraith Sharon, who had been overseeing everything, gave a subtle nod without saying anything and disappeared from the mirror. Oldea District, Lumia Forest. Opening his eyes calmly, Adrian said without emotion, "He's here." A moment ago, he felt some of his threads broken by a person. Flora also opened her eyes and looked straight ahead. Standing calmly from the trunk, the redhead watched as a man emerged from the thick forest and entered the clearing with a slow gait. He appeared to be between 40 and 50 years old. His dark blonde hair had no white lines, and his eyes were rare amber. This time, he was wearing black trousers, a shirt, and a jacket. His appearance was elegant and tidy, which was very appropriate considering his path. An aura of power seemed to emanate from his body, and Adrian could not help but feel considerable respect for him. Once he was about 10 meters away, this man looked him in the eye, placed a hand on his chest, and bowed with respect. "It is a great blessing to meet you, Lord Kenway. I hope you can forgive my late arrival. There is no excuse for my mistake. I beg your forgiveness. Allow me to introduce myself, although I am sure you already know me. I am Dabrio Tamara, an imperative mage and member of the last righteous branch of the Tamara family. I come to represent this entire branch. Please help us to confront the fallen branches that are hunting us down." Adrian calmly looked at this demigod prostrating himself before him, his gaze impassive. "First, let's get one thing straight, Mr. Dabrio," he began in a heavy voice, and the demigod sank a little deeper. "My lord knows what your family believes, and he is extremely disappointed." Dabrio tensed for a second and quickly said, "Please forgive us." "Wait until I finish talking, Tamara." With icy eyes, Adrian cut off the demigod, who could only tremble a little and sink. Not wanting to offend the blessed of a god, Dabrio Tamara merely nodded. Seeing this, the redhead gave a slight nod of satisfaction. He continued, "My lord has nothing to do with that lunatic they call the Blood Emperor. Never confuse him or think of that fellow as if he were the Scarlet Monarch. My lord is a much older and fairer calamity. Never dare to think otherwise." To these weighty words, Dabrio only pursed his lips slightly but gave a reverent nod. "Understood, Lord Kenway. I beg your forgiveness for our mistake. It is not me you have to ask for forgiveness from," Adrian said without much emotion. Closing his eyes, he spoke again. "Now that your mistake has been corrected, tell me, Dabrio Tamara, do you still want the help of the Scarlet Monarch?" "With all my being," Dabrio said with conviction and emotion, his bow sinking a little deeper. "Although I committed the horrible sin of thinking that the Scarlet Monarch was the Mad Blood Emperor, my words were not lics. If he can help us, the Tamara family swears its faith and servitude for the rest of our lives." Silence reigned in the clearing. The wind passed, stirring the red hair of the man who looked at the demigod expressionlessly. Dabrio Tamara said nothing. He maintained his reverence in anxious anticipation. "Raise your head, Tamara. Raise your head, Tamara." With permission finally given, he did as he was asked, and what he saw froze him. A holy smile was on Adrian Kenway's face, who was looking at him with a gentleness he did not think possible. It was the look and smile of a true saint. With a gentle voice but with a hardness that only the blessed of a god could give, Adrian said, "My lord is a merciful God as he is just. He is willing to extend his hand, but you must prove worthy. Hear me, for this is his will and his word. Those who are not willing to save themselves do not deserve to be saved. To prove your words are honest and genuine, Dabrio Tamara, you must save yourself. But fear not. I am the hand of my lord, and I will help you with this, but its success will depend on what you are willing to do." With that said, Adrian paused for a moment and looked serenely at the demigod. "What are you willing to do to survive?" Coming out of the trance he had fallen into, Dabrio spoke with the truth of his soul. "Anything. I'm willing to do anything." The redhead nodded. "Then it's done." Sitting back down on the log, the redhead placed one leg over his knee and rested his cheek on his palm. A small smile played on his lips. "Tell me about these pursuers. Let's see what I can do." Hearing those words visibly calmed the demigod, who nodded deeply as he stood up. "Of course, Lord Kenway. We thank you very much." Always maintaining respect, Dabrio gave thanks first. Once that was done, he let out a soft sigh and began. "Long ago, our branch was not the only one left. There were many of us divided into small groups that, although we were separated, we kept in touch, and we kept cash other informed of our status over time. During that time, our total number easily exceeded 120. But something started to happen 2 years ago. We were losing contact with branches, we didn't know what was happening, and many of them began to fall quickly. Initially, we thought that the churches had redoubled their efforts to annihilate us or that the rest of the Tamara family who had turned to the primordial demoness were hunting us down. They had finally returned to finish the job, but we discovered this was not the case too late. One of the last remaining extensions revealed the problem before they fell. Another of our branches had turned to an unknown evil god, and now their first job to do was to exterminate us. Although the man was hiding it, Adrian could still see the great pain in his eyes, but he did not interrupt him and continued to listen. We found out too late. More than half of us fell at their hands. Because they also knew our methods of contact, we no longer communicated. The last time I spoke to them, our number was around 50. Dabrio clenched his fists a little more, managing to contain his fury. The red-haired man paused for a few seconds of respect and then asked, "Who are these traitorous branches?" We divided ourselves according to strength and numbers. We were in groups of 50, 40, and 30, respectively. Each group had a demigod as their leader, controlling a quantity of our family's resources according to the numbers they protected. Although we knew exactly what the others had, we didn't know where they hid it, just as we couldn't touch each other's resources. We did this in case one of us fell so that the others could survive and not be left helpless with nothing. You may have guessed by now, the traitorous group is the one of 30, Dabrio explained, annoyance shining in his eyes. The redhead was silent for a few seconds, a doubt born in his mind that he quickly expressed. You are the leader of the group of 50, obviously. The last to survive. I doubt they are only after your characteristics. You have something they want, don't you? Adrian finished, already getting an idea of what it could be. As the largest group, it's natural that we have control over the most important artifacts and resources. And as their leader, I'm the only one who knows where those artifacts are. I'm sure they're after our only 2 grade 0 sealed artifacts. Not just one but 2. I know one is an artifact made with the characteristics of an angel of concealment, but what is the other one? Somewhat surprised by this, he let it slip a little in his expression but did not question it. What about the other 2? The group of 40 had 3 grade 1 artifacts and 6 grade 25, while the traitorous group had 1 grade 1 and about 10 artifacts ranging from grades 2 to 3. Knowing that this information could be counterproductive, Dabrio quickly added. Not all the members of the group were Beyonders. Only a small number, no more than 10, and an even lower number of half-sequences. Clever, I was about to tell you to fuck off. Tapping on his cheek without changing his expression, Adrian continued his questioning. How many Beyonders should be chasing you? What kind of artifacts could they bring? Their abilities, their sequences. You're giving me too little information. If you want this to amount to something, I need more. Dabrio bowed deeply. Forgive me, Lord. I will begin now. If I'm not mistaken, there should only be 4, including the demigod, who would be a sequence 4 imperative mage. I will start by explaining the grade 1 artifacts, which they will most likely bring. The one they took care of was the Journal of Secrets. Depending on the level of information one writes on its pages, and how secret it is, it will return information of equal or slightly lesser value. This is the one I think is the least likely to be brought. It has no other abilities apart from that one and its negative effect is nothing to worry about. It cannot be used in public, only in private. The artifacts of Group 40 are the most worrying. The first is the Festival of Endless Madness. It is a party mask of an exaggerated dragon that, once put on, can release a wave of madness in all directions over a large area, making no difference between ally and enemy. Anyone below a demigod would instantly lose control, and even I would be on the verge of madness and suffer severe mental damage. The second is the Doll of Sickness. As its name suggests, it is a high-quality porcelain doll that can release a cloud of diseases ranging from tuberculosis and gastroenteritis to one that devours and freezes the flesh. This one is capable of differentiating between friend and foe but only attacks men, ignoring women with the sole exception of 2 women related by blood. The artifact will prioritize them over anything else. The third is the most dangerous but also the strongest of the grade 1 artifacts we possess. The Sword of Dawn. Dabrio sighed a little at this point. The Sword of Dawn is also the strangest artifact we possess. It was formed after a notable archbishop of the Church of the Eternal Blazing Sun fell in the War of the 4 Emperors, so its abilities are those of an unshadowed of the Sun pathway. Its abilities as well as negative effects change from carrier to carrier. This is due to its specialty. It possesses living qualities that make the main problem of this artifact difficult to control. To use it, you must first make a contract with it.
In this contract, one has to clarify precisely which abilities they will use and the restrictions they will follow from there. If the restrictions are not correlative to the abilities one wishes to use or are not restrictive enough, the sword will reject this and make the contract on its own. This, without exception, makes the negative effects so strong and difficult to control that they are impossible to use and almost always kill the contractor.
But, if the contract is accepted, this is notarized. Those will be the abilities and the negative effect it will possess. If one tries to use an ability not in the contract, they will be severely punished by having their soul burned to nothingness by the sword. Adrian blinked a little, surprised at this information. It's the first time I've heard of such an artifact. Because of this negative effect, it is possible that the one who caused the death of this archbishop was a high sequence of the Justiciar pathway, perhaps even the Knight Emperor himself. Scratching his cheek slightly, the redhead sighed and nodded. From what we can gather, the Grade 1 artifact they will have in their possession will be the Sword of Dawn. The other two are very dangerous to use in large groups and cause great destruction, something they want to avoid as it would attract the attention of the wise owls.
Tap tap tap. His eyes focused on the man. How are you sure they didn't use the characteristics of the leader of Group 40 to advance one of them to Sequence 4? And what about the Grade 0 artifacts? Why didn't you use those?
This bothered him as soon as Dabrio mentioned that the leaders of each group were demigods and the state of the sealed artifacts. Dabrio sighed tiredly. That's of the way they are sealed. Only by bringing two demigods of either the arbiter pathway of the lawyer pathway or a mix of the two will the seal open. This is not only for safety reasons but because of the negative effects of the artifacts. Only two demigods of those two pathways can safely enter to extract them. Laughing a little at the end, the Tamara sighed sadly. They don't know this. If they did, they wouldn't have killed the other one and hunted me down. And for them to birth another demigod during this time, without the help of the family, it's impossible to do it alone. The ritual consists of a minimum group of 2,000 people or more, who can be Beyander or not, following the order you established in your control area for a whole week. By area of control, I mean the area where you protect the order. If you are settled, this can be your house with about 2 extra buildings, and if you are part of an organization, it can, at the minimum, include your entire street. And therein lies the problem. This family branch is not part of any organization as they have constantly moved. They have not given their domain time to grow, even with the help of another imperative mage. Without time to settle down and being part of an organization that controls the area, the ritual is impossible to complete. In the same way that outside their control area, the Beyonders of the Arbiter pathway are weaker. Outside our order, our abilities cannot show their full power. Adrian felt he had reached enlightenment with this information. That's why Zio asked for the hunt for bodies to be in her area of control. If it had been outside this area, her abilities as a judge would have been weakened, and she wouldn't have been much help. Of course, it's not that she was much help, being that she was Sequence 6 in a battle of Sequence 4, but even so, that was indeed her intention. With this information, it is not wrong to say and affirm that an imperative mage enforces the law. Outside their area of control, how can they enforce the law correctly? It's as if an ordinary policeman from Argentina wanted to arrest a Paraguayan citizen in Paraguay. His power to enforce the law would be practically nil. Knowing this was a theory for now, he put it to the most appropriate person to confirm it. So this imperative mage hunting you is not in an area that he controls the order. Does that mean his abilities are weaker? To a certain extent, yes. The difference is considerable compared to when he would be in a place he controls and protects. Dabrio nodded gently. It's the same with all imperative mages, which is why they don't leave the areas designated by the organizations they work for, he added. Is there any way to avoid this? Any exceptions to the rule where you have to stay in one area? Dabrio paused for a moment before answering, and after 15 seconds, he nodded. There is only one. Suppose the organization of which an imperative mage is part is globally recognized. In that case, the highest head of the organization can give special permission that would allow them to use their abilities 100% wherever they go. Of course, they would lose the advantages of having a control zone, but in return, their abilities would not be diminished. A globally recognized organization. That's the Orthodox churches, so only they can give such permission. The justiciar pathway is much more curious than I thought. Adrian admitted to himself before sighing and nodding.
Well, at least we can rule out this enemy's ability to use their abilities to the full. Of course, he will make up for that with the artifacts and equipment he will bring. Murmuring a little, a smile began to form on his face.
I always had a question. Tell me, Mr. Dabrio, what would happen if an imperative mage lost his voice? Would he be able to issue an order without it?
The question immediately made Flora tense slightly, who finally understood what the man was saying before.
Dabrio nodded. One of the cores of the imperative mages is the voice of law. If we lose it, we cannot give a new law, but we can still use other abilities to defend the established order.
At his words, Jacob's pupils shrank for a moment. You really have a crazy vision, Flora thought, somewhat dazed, as she looked at the redhead's back.
Adrian's smile quickly sharpened into a predatory one. The plan in his mind had already been decided. Mr. Dabrio, you know the price, don't you? Tamara nodded calmly. I've already accepted that. All the profits from this will be yours. Good boy, so before we start, I need 4 more things from you, Adrian said, holding up 4 fingers. As you say, Lord Kenway. Dabrio bowed deeply. First, I need you to explain to us from scratch all the skills on your path from sequence 9 to 4. Don't skip a single detail. Second, I need you to show each of them to us and help the lady next to me to practice them. Third, that you explain all the grade 2 artifacts they might have. You still need to do that. With each request, 1 finger went down until only 1 was left. And fourth, when only his index finger was left, the smile on Adrian's face turned extremely sweet. I need your blood, hair, and nails. The more you can give me, the better. Artyros District. Warehouse 7, a few hours later. Praise the monarch. After making the prayer position and waiting a few seconds with his eyes closed until the ritual stopped, Charlotte finally opened them. In front of the altar of the Scarlet Monarch was a basket, and a metal vial protruded from it. Reaching out, Charlotte could barely contain the trembling in his fingers. Even through the metal and its simple seal, his spirituality smoked with attention to the contents. This vial contained the blood of a demigod. This is the blood of a true sequence 4, a high-quality ingredient. His purple eyes flashed briefly, and the young man quickly closed and began to rub them with his fingers. To use the eyes of mystery prying to look at it would undoubtedly have consequences. The core rule of the mystery prior is to respect and fear the unknown, for one never knows where they are looking, so they must always be careful. By suppressing his eyes, which had more than once almost made him see something he shouldn't have, Charlotte opened them, and his piercing gaze shifted from the vial in his hands to the small basket below him. More than 10 metal vials like this one were arranged in rows. Next to them were large and small containers. From what his boss had told him in the message sent by the Scarlet Monarch, these contained various hairs and nails of the demigod. His boss instructed him to use these high-level materials to create charms to help him with the hunting he was planning. To think that he managed to convince a demigod to give not only so much blood but hair and nails. The boss is terrifying. A small smile formed, and Charlotte quickly moved around his office. If this was how he could secure a supply of high-level materials, the boss could be as terrifying as he wanted. It will be fine for him as long as they don't have to see that. He assembled several slices of precious metals, most of which were gold, placed them in front of the altar, and carefully moved the basket aside. Having done that and with his trusty silver dagger, he quickly formed a wall of spirituality around the altar. With all the preparations ready, he quickly grabbed one of the gold slices, the various oils, gunpowder, and iron and began to pray in ancient Hermes. The Scarlet Monarch who burns depravity. You are the calamity forgotten by time. You are the stranger who comes from the unknown. I pray to you to give me strength. Give me strength to complete a charm with the blood of an imperative mage. Scarlet Monarch, please lend your strength to my charm. As the incantation neared completion, Charlotte felt the whole office change. Instead of being his laboratory, he felt he was in a courtroom at the moment of sentencing. The candles on the altar burned an intense red. The flames rose and seemed to bleed small fiery tears. These tears enveloped the vial with blood and melted it quickly. The fire tears then mixed with the blood. The red tears increased many times in size, and tongues of golden light began to cover them. The wall of spirituality of the altar trembled for a few moments more but managed to hold itself up. The light emitted by that golden crimson sphere illuminated it, and Charlotte felt his heavy and mighty hand. He felt like a just judge, his hand had been forced and his spirit cried out for severe punishment for the lawbreaker. Knowing this was a critical point, he used that heavy hand and, grabbing one of the golden slices, he quickly began carving multiple symbols and numerals all over its body. With each stroke, his hand felt heavier and heavier, but he managed to hold on and continued carving despite the thick sweat on his face. Finally, when the base was ready, the charm began to glow a dark gold, flying from his hands to the floating flame in the middle of the altar. Fush! A bright light made him have to close his eyes for a moment. When he opened them again, Charlotte looked on in amazement at how the charm had changed. It was now dark golden, with some reddish details in the four corners. The numbers on the path were well ordered, in clean rows, surrounded by aggressive magic labels and fiery patterns. The figure of a judge's gavel was its centerpiece. Huff, huff, huff. Even out of breath, his great satisfaction would not be taken away from him. He had finally done ill. A high-level charm. Quickly, he took out his notebook and wrote down the formula and its ability. Gold, 15 milliliters of blood from an imperative mage, iron, gunpowder. It is capable of launching a punishment equal to that of an imperative mage. It is a ranged attack whose maximum distance is 10 meters. Only beings with divinity can resist the punishment, but they will be severely injured. Those without divinity would be mortally wounded, even dying on impact. There is a requirement for its use. The person receiving the punishment must have broken a law given by the voice of law. Lowering his pencil, the young man couldn't help but sigh a little. Although the ability of this charm was deadly, this ability was not what his boss wanted. Luckily, I've already found the formula for punishment. Now I need to find the formula for aura. He rolled his eyes at the ingredients he still had and pursed his lips a little. This would take a while. But at least his boss had said he only needed a minimum of 2 for his plan. He held the charm in his hands and noticed how warm it was to the touch. He held it up and looked at her for a few long moments. A smile formed on his face. Death penalty shall be your name. Having named his first high-level charm, Charlotte set the activation incantation to execution in ancient Hermes and carefully set the charm aside. Preparing the ingredients for his second attempt, the young man couldn't help but sigh a little. This was going to be a busy week. Releasing the handle of the fiery blood dagger, Adrian looked at the soldier at his side as he held the flame, representing the young man with purple eyes. Every time he asks for something, do what I did. Let me know when your spirituality is less than half, and I'll give you more. Yes, Lord. The fire soldier saluted. He handed the blood dagger to the soldier and poured more than 3/4 of his spirituality into him. The red-haired man then left the city and returned to his body. As soon as he opened his eyes, his attention was drawn to a black-haired woman, Flora, who was staring at Dabrio Tamara, whose eyes flashed with electricity. From his place sitting in the clearing, he rested his cheek against his palm and watched the practice with interest. To Flora's eyes, there were distinct, shimmering blobs of light and color on Dabrio Tamara's body. Symbols accompanied each. One of them pulsed, and, raising a hand, she flicked her wrist. The blob did not change its state or show any change, the theft had failed. Unconcerned by this, she twisted her wrist again. The blob trembled for a moment but remained in place. Failure. The trembling stopped, but now the symbols and colors that made it up had become clearer, slightly easier to decipher. Seeing this, Flora sighed softly and squeezed her fingers a little. She twisted her wrist. The blob was cut from the man's body and quickly and smoothly flew to her. Lightning bolts began to emerge from her eyes, and a small smile formed on her face. Successful theft. She had taken the psychic piercing. With the success of this theft, she looked on with satisfaction as the different blobs settled and their colors and symbols became clearer and more understandable. Her understanding and deciphering of the target would increase a little with each theft, whether successful or not. Of course, her understanding and ability to decipher would be greater if she had succeeded. The next time she tries to steal the same power, the chance of failure would be much less.
Feeling as if something had been taken from him, Dabrio let out a soft sigh.
For the next 12 hours, he would be unable to use that power.
Although Lord Kenway said they wouldn't be able to find me for now, I can't help but feel nervous, the man admitted honestly. Although it was not an important or indispensable skill, a card he could not use meant his chances of escape were considerably reduced. The redhead nodded without much concern. As long as you're with me, no one will be able to find you, and we have to make the most of every second to practice. We can't waste a single moment.
The longer the prey remained undetectable, the more likely the hunters would get nervous and question whether something had changed. Adrian needed them to think they still had the upper hand, so this couldn't last for long.
Remember, this success depends on how smooth and fast we are. The more tricks we have, the better.
Dabrio nodded without changing his expression, understood.
He had his own means of anti-divination, but even so, he had to be on the move to avoid being found. If the Blessed of the Scarlet Monarch said it was okay, then he would listen.
After all, there was nothing else he could do now apart from doing as he was asked.
Adrian then turned to his partner. Well, how are you getting on, Ada?
The woman smiled gently. To steal an ability, it's not just my understanding of the pathway that matters. It's also about finding the right symbol. I already have one of the two.
A few more days, and I'll be able to steal the powers I want at most on the second attempt.
Dabrio Tamara had already explained the Arbiter pathway in depth a while ago. Now, she was on to the practical part of using what she had been taught.
At least she seems to be enjoying herself. Adrian noticed how the woman's eyes shone.
Maybe it was because it was the first time she could seriously practice stealing the powers from another demigod without them being able to do anything about it. Shaking his head internally, he took hangover time out of his pocket and opened it. Looking at the time, he sighed a little, leaned against the tree he was leaning against, and closed his eyes. I'm going to take a little nap. Wake me if anything happens. Somewhat dazed, Dabrio Tamara paused for a moment and focused his attention on the man in the distance. At this time, he always does that. Don't pay him much attention, Flora said, not interested, and then a sweet and dangerous smile formed on her face.
Now, why don't I try to steal your voice? Although his expression did not change, Dabrio could not help but press his lips together a little.
Having heard the last part, the redhead laughed to himself, extremely amused.
And to think that you tell me not to provoke demigods. A bit of a hypocrite, aren't you? Leaving aside how unfair his dear worm was, he continued silently counting.
Once he reached 30 and heard the hangover timer needles mark 3 in the afternoon, he felt something pull him.
Despite his eyes closed, crimson still covered his sight, but this only lasted a few moments.
When he opened his eyes again, he found himself back in his seat at the bottom of the moldy brass table, a silent and stoic man next to him.
At the top of the table, a figure shrouded in fog watched everything calmly. The first blonde woman to join the club got up from her seat and, grabbing the edges of her dress, she gave an elegant curtsy to this figure.
Good afternoon, Mr. Fool, Justice greeted cheerfully. Smiling slightly at the noblewoman, Klein discreetly activated his spiritual vision by biting his molar twice. Bringing everyone together for the wieldy meeting, he noticed that Justice's expenditure on spirituality had increased slightly. Observing the intensity of her aura, Klein nodded internally to himself. Through the increase in colors, Justice had recently advanced. She obtained all the ingredients a long time ago. With the last mission where she digested a large part of her potion, it is no surprise that she is already sequence 8. Klein thought with slight interest. This confirmed what his soul brother had said some time ago. It was not the length of time acting that mattered, but the quality of the acting. Justice had only been a sequence 9 for over 2 months and had already completely digested her potion. Following this discovery, he paid a little more attention to controlling his expressions and body language as he returned her greeting. Good afternoon, Miss Justice. Congratulations on your advancement.
The noblewoman's happy smile grew a little wider, and she bowed a little deeper. Thank you very much, Mr. Fool.
According to what that madman said, Miss Justice was a spectator. So now she must be a telepathist. First glanced sideways at the other blonde. Her speed of digestion is not bad, although she is a little slower than little Jerry. The greetings went by quite quickly, as did the fool's reading time, and once again, no new pages were delivered. This time, the one who broke the silence in the hall was the youngest of the group. Mr. Chariot, I'm not far from obtaining the contribution points to get what you requested. A week at the most, for the next tarot club, I should be able to deliver the doctor potion formula along with the main ingredients, Derek said happily.
Finally, he could pay for the powerful artifact the man had gotten for him, and he wouldn't have to feel bad about using it.
Adrian looked at the young boy, and the corners of his lips rose slightly. I'm glad to hear that. Little son, good job.
Derek puffed out his chest with pride, his eyes shining brightly. But the man continued before he could express his gratitude for such kind words.
Little son, I have another order for you. I saw it as a fairly common ingredient on the list you gave us last week, so I was hoping you could get it for me.
Unconsciously, Derek grew, puffing out his chest and shoulders a little. Of course, Mr. Chariot. What do you need? The second most supportive person, Mr. Fool being the first, needs his help, which filled the young man with a great thrill of proving to himself that he could.
Without a doubt, a sweet summer child. Laughing slightly, the redhead explained calmly, I need the remnant shadows of a shadow predator.
In the City of Silver, a Forsaken was known by that name. A monster without a common form that usually appears slightly humanoid is capable of using the shadows as a hiding place and turning them into weapons or restraints once it has found its prey. The remnant shadows of this monster were the main ingredient in the Shadow Ascetic Potion. But there was a somewhat annoying condition for it to work as an ingredient. So quickly, Adrian explained, I must clarify, they must not be from different predators but all the remnant shadow of a single one. At the request, Derek pursed his lips a little.
What Mr. Chariot needs is a common ingredient, but with the requirement, they become considerably rare. The young man couldn't help but worry a little.
The shadow predator was a common monster in the somewhat deep parts of the darkness. So common that it would be strange not to encounter at least 10 on a regular expedition. But for that very reason, the materials obtained from this monster were stored in bulk. Therefore, the remnant shadows would never belong to the same monster, they would always be mixed.
Of course. I can set aside a shadow for myself in the explorations I'm participating in. There would be no problem. I would only have to pay a few contribution points. A barter was out of the question, he didn't have many valuable things left.
With that in mind, Derek nodded, it won't be a problem, Mr. Chariot. But what would you be paying for this ingredient? Adrian did not reply directly but asked, how close are you to digesting your potion, little son? I'm about to digest it completely, Mr. Chariot. The young boy answered honestly, but his eyes lit up the next second.
Feeling the evident emotion in the young man, Adrian laughed amusedly and nodded, confirming his thoughts. I offer the potion formula next to Bard. Light supplicant.
Pausing briefly, he added with a small smile and narrowed eyes, are you interested in this deal?
Derek nodded with emotion, his response not taking a second. Yes. The redhead lifted his head from his palm and adjusted a little, then I will give you the payment now.
His words stunned the young boy a little. But why, Mr. Chariot? Your request is not a complicated one, I can deliver it at the next tarot club, there's no need to pay me now.
Although he was happy to receive the formula now, his happiness was outweighed by his feeling that he was taking advantage of the man. Because I don't think I'll be able to attend the next meeting, little son.
This piqued the curiosity of almost everyone who looked curiously at the man. In the end, he's going to bring that up here. Furs pressed her lips together to contain a big sigh. As innocent as ever, Derek asked the question on everyone's mind. Why is that, Mr. Chariot? If I may ask. Raising a hand, the redhead waved it dismissively. Oh, nothing special. I'm preparing some things, and I can't afford any mistakes because that could end in my death. Derek felt his heart sink. Your death, Mr. Chariot? The boy asked, visibly alarmed. All eyes were quickly drawn to him, some concerned while others were stunned. Audrey unconsciously brought a hand to her chest, where her heart was beating with fear. Death. We're not going to lose a member, are we? Especially one of the founding members.
What the hell has this idiot gotten himself into now? Cursing to himself, Klein quickly checked his Smurf account.
World joined in with a deep voice. Do you need assistance, Mr. Chariot? What is the situation? He had finally met someone from his world after believing he was alone. Fire was going to fall from the sky before he lost him.
I can bring my ship ashore for a few days. Tell me where you are, Mr. Chariot. I can help you get off the land if necessary. Alger also entered the conversation seriously.
Perhaps the churches found him and are preparing to capture him, and Chariot realized their plan and is preparing an escape. He thought, narrowing his eyes slightly.
Although his carefree attitude didn't show it, Chariot was one of the most wanted men in the world with a massive bounty on his head. It wouldn't be unusual if they finally found him. Furs wanted to give herself a big slap in the face out of embarrassment. You could have said it better, although you're right, it wasn't necessary to be so honest.
Such a reaction stunned Adrian, who only blinked a little lost. But, recovering a little, he said humorously, "Haha. It's not what you think. I plan to hunt a rather dangerous prey, so a little caution is necessary." Under the gray fog, Klein's face went flat. He silently controlled the world so that he would look straight ahead without saying anything. Alger and Audrey also went flat and looked away. Oh, so that's all it was. Derek breathed a visible sigh of relief, and the tension that had gripped him left him. Hee, sorry for the scare. Scratching his cheek innocently, the redhead winked. I should have explained myself better. The young man shook his head and looked at him curiously. Could you tell us what you plan to hunt, Mr. Chariot? There might be something in the City of Silver Library that could help you. I'd be surprised if there was, little son. Adrian laughed a little more, and in answer to your question, I'm only going to hunt a demigod. Nothing out of the ordinary. He added with extreme casualness.
Yup, that's how I felt. Feeling extremely validated, Furs could hardly contain the great sigh of relief that wanted to leave her body and greet the others.
Mr. Chariot. Audrey entered the conversation, somewhat dazed. Are you sure this is a good idea? I was asked the same question. And as long as I keep things in order, this is possible for the current me, Adrian replied calmly before turning to the hanged man. I really appreciate the offer, but at the moment, there is no need to escape. But I will remember your words. Alger said nothing. He nodded tensely and looked away from the man, his eyes trembling a little. But what sequence is Mr. Chariot? To say that he's going to hunt a demigod so casually, he at least has to be one, too. But I don't think that's the case. Maybe he has the support of one. Knowing that Mr. Overthinker's mind was now racing, the redhead turned his attention back to the gloomy man next to him and smiled sweetly. Mr. World, would you be interested in participating? I don't want to die again, thank you very much. Besides, I have to do the tarot club next week. I don't have the luxury of taking a week off like some crazy people, controlling his expression and body language. Klein controlled the world. I have to refuse your request, Mr. Chariot. I'm sorry, the Smurf account replied. What a shame. I really would have liked to see your moves. The redhead shook his head, a little disappointed. Since Mr. World refused to participate in the hunt, then this is something that Mr. Fool has no desire to participate in. So maybe this is more of a personal project for Mr. Chariot. Of course, I can't rule out the possibility that it's also a mission commissioned by the Scarlet Monarch. Alger thought momentarily, trying to understand the man's plan. At that moment, the man turned and looked at everyone with a mischievous twinkle in his eye. Just because I'm not attending the next meeting doesn't mean I won't know what happened. So think twice before you gossip about me. Then, he winked. I have eyes everywhere. What's that supposed to mean? Audrey frowned imperceptibly, unsure whether the man was joking or not. Could it be because as the Scarlet Monarch's Blessed One, the Blessed One of Mr. Fool will fill him in on what happened so he doesn't get left behind in case something interesting happens? Alger thought. You mean me, don't you? Furs could hardly control the trembling of her lips.
Would she now have to act as a spy? Mr. Chariot, you're really fearless. Derek thought with great admiration, and after a few moments, he gave the man a deep nod. I wish you luck on your hunt, Mr. Chariot. I hope everything goes well.
I appreciate that, little son, but you have nothing to worry about. Adrian smiled slightly. Try to be careful now, okay? I will. Nodding to the little boy, the redhead turned his attention to the fool, and after asking for something to write with, he handed the light supplicant formula to the young man. Derek held the formula in his hands with somewhat heavy eyes.
Light supplicant potion formula. Main ingredients.
A piece of brilliance rock, or the powder of dazzling soul. Blood of a mirror hedgehog, or the heart of a magma titan.
Supplementary ingredients. A golden-rimmed sunflower. Asterisk 3 drops of aconite juice. Once again, his debt to the red-haired man had increased. And while this bothered him a little, it motivated him to try even harder.
I will have all your orders as soon as possible, Mr. Chariot, Derek said determinedly. Adrian smiled at the boy. I'll be waiting. With all the club members leaving, the Great Hall of Giants changed into a warm room. Sitting on the sofa, Klein looked with visible annoyance at his fellow.
Hunting a demigod. What are you thinking? Are you crazy?
I'll have the support of another demigod. You don't have to worry so much, Adrian said calmly before his eyes took on a certain sparkle.
Although, please, continue. Knowing that you care so much for me fills my heart with joy.
The words he was about to say died with the first thing he said, but his expression died with the second. Klein buried his face in his hands, releasing a great, long, exasperated sigh. You have a problem, you know that, don't you? He grunted between his palms. I accepted it a long time ago. Adrian nodded in agreement with the man. Raising his face slightly, Kissen looked at him. Can I at least ask why you're going to do this? Is it a mission from the Scarlet Monarch? Or is it something else?
If being blessed by a god meant that you had to hunt down a sequence 4 Beander when you were only sequence 6 yourself, Klein no longer envied his partner.
Yes, and yes. Adrian was honest. This is both a mission from my lord and something I want to achieve for myself.
For yourself? Klein raised an eyebrow. He understood the first part. It was his god's assignment. But what did he want to achieve?
Raising a finger and placing it on his lips, the redhead closed one eye, and the one that remained open gleamed with enormous satisfaction. To complete my sequence 5 ritual, of course. It consists of planning and capturing a Beander of a higher sequence than mine, and this little one falls right into that range. Klein immediately looked at him as if he had grown 3 different heads. Every one of them sings opera, rock, and rap simultaneously in a melody without harmony or rhythm. That's even worse, he muttered dazedly. Klein couldn't help but remember Krestet Sesimir and the pressure from his body.
That guy was an actual demigod. And standing near him made it uncomfortable for Klein to move, not to mention his poor poet who looked like a wet puppy.
This guy next to him was planning to capture one of those monsters for his sequence 5 ritual. At the ridiculous expression on the man's face, Adrian couldn't help but laugh a little. Have a little faith in me, will you? Is there anything I can say that will change your mind? Klein asked, even though he already knew the answer. Nope. Adrian popped his cheeks to emphasize his point more. I'll be sure to leave flowers on your grave. Klein joked a little before sinking onto the sofa and staring at the ceiling. Pap pap. Looking to his side, at the hand that had patted his shoulder. Klein saw the small, somewhat resigned smile on his fellow's face. In this world, we will have to take risks we don't want to take to advance. I want to tell you that you won't have to do that very often, but I don't like lying to you. You'll lose count of the times you'll have to take them. Most of the time, those risks won't fully compensate for what we had to risk, but we have no choice. Roussel learned that the hard way. I learned it the hard way, too. And unfortunately, so have you.
For a moment, Klein saw that day again. The monstrous Megos, the hand coming out of his captain's chest, and that boot that ended his life.
Blinking again and with that memory leaving him, he could only nod with another sigh, a sadder one. You're right about that. Pap pap. Putting his hand away after more pats, silence returned to the room. Opening his eyes back to his body, Adrian breathed in fresh air and got up from his grass seat. Walking over to where Flora and Dabria were, He looked curiously at how they hadn't changed places. "How are you doing?" Dabrio didn't reply. He just gave a thumbs up. Flora, for her part, looked at him with a satisfied smile. "I've already stolen his voice. Now I'm trying to see if I can steal his aura." "Nice." Praising his worm a little, he gave the demigod 2 thumbs up. "Keep it up, Mr. Dabrio. You can do it." The man just gave the other thumb a thumbs up, his expression indecipherable, and the corners of his lips trembled. Train station, Backland. Tuesday morning. If you ever have any problems, remember you can always send us a letter. Also, you can come back if you feel it's too much. Lady Matched said somewhat breathlessly, her CYCS bloodshot. Restraining the urge to roll her eyes. Hazel Matched hugged her mother. "I'll be fine, mother. You don't have to worry so much." Lady Matched wrapped trembling arms around her only daughter and hugged her tightly. I know. It's just that I thought this day wouldn't come until much later." "You're still so young," she murmured, gently stroking her daughter's greenish hair. Mori Matched looked at this and could only sigh a little.
Why did all this have to happen? The man couldn't help but lament a little at the world's injustice.
A daughter was only supposed to leave home once she had found a marriage and gone to live with her husband, or wife. Of course, he would never force his daughter to do such things. If she wanted to leave home without getting married, then he wouldn't have a problem. But he and his wife would much rather that their little girl never left.
But because of the great love they had for their daughter, they would make a sacrifice. He would have to go to Parliament as soon as he sent his daughter away. The new party and the Conservatives were clashing harder than ever. Tensions would only continue to explode. With the kingdom in such a delicate state now and the possibility of war on the horizon, he wanted to save his daughter's innocence.
In Lindbergh, she would be safe. With that desire deep in his heart, he raised a hand and gently caressed his little girl's head. "Try to work hard and remember to write to us." "All right. It doesn't have to be every day. But at least 1 letter a week is good. Your mother and I would really appreciate it." Feeling the corners of her eyes getting a little wet, Hazel blinked hard and, puffing a little, squeezed back. "Okay. I'll do my best," she said, rebelliously. That's my girl." Lady Matched smiled softly, and after a few long seconds, she let go. "Make us proud," Mori encouraged. "Make lots of friends." Lady lifted a handkerchief and wiped her eyes. Next to them, with her arm just out of the cast and now resting on an armrest, her personal maid Annabeth raised a white handkerchief and bid her farewell, tears falling from her eyes. "Please don't forget me, miss. Come back soon," Annabeth cried, the pain in her chest making it difficult for her to form words. The university did not allow servants, and she could not travel in her current condition. She had not yet fully recovered from her injuries. With great regret, she would have to let go of the girl she had watched grow up and become a young lady.
"Don't cry anymore. We'll see each other again." Raising a gloved hand while shaking her head, Hazel said goodbye with a small smile as she grabbed her suitcase and boarded the train, alone. Choo-choo. Watching the city where she was born and raised all her life get further and further away, the young woman gazed at it all from her first-class scat. Her expression didn't change, but her eyes had become somewhat teary. Wiping her eyes with a handkerchief, Hazel snorted ungracefully, and her lips began to tremble a little. She could finally fulfill her dream of becoming a powerful Beander. That was what she had always wanted once she discovered that hidden world. For all these reasons, she should be happy now. Ecstatic even. It was supposed to be easy. Why does it hurt so much? She mumbled, her thoughts a brewing storm she could not make heads nor tails of. Sighing a little to calm down, Hazel put those thoughts aside for later. Calmly, she took a notebook out of her briefcase and opened it. The university entrance exam was tomorrow, and although she wouldn't be in class most of the time, that didn't mean she didn't have to study. After all, she was still the one who had to get in. Of course, it's not like I would have allowed one of teacher's soldiers to take the exam for me. I may be a swindler, but even we have our pride to maintain. With that last thought, Hazel did not look at the now distant Backland and focused only on studying. Lindbergh, Ashera. Artelia District, Stokowski Street.
In a carriage rented for the day, Vivian reviewed the contract and the paperwork with a watchful eye. Rereading the amount offered, she looked up at her boss sitting across from her. A little curiosity was dancing in them. "Mr. Wayne, isn't this a bit too much money for the job you need done? 2,000 sasam should be enough." Harvey Wayne gently shook his head, his laurel shining softly in the dim light of the carriage. "I want this job to be their #1 priority. Besides, there's no better incentive for them to become our business partners than a few extra bills."
A few extra bills. Vivian muttered absently. If 8,000 sasams were a few bills for this guy. She didn't want to know how much money was a lot for him. Shaking those thoughts from her mind, she moved on from the legal documents to the notes she had for the day. "Once we finish the talks with the United Artists Association, we'll have to go back to Wayne Enterprises to confirm with the hired musicians the songs and pieces you'll be needing." The number of artists her boss needed had increased considerably, to the point that they were now on their way to an association made up of themselves to ask for more.
"I just hope this doesn't happen again with the musicians." Sighing a little, Vivian put her notes aside and rearranged the documents so everything would be in order once they reached their destination.
Unable to help it, her eyes moved to the other passenger in the carriage, the white-haired woman who seemed not to care about anything as long as it had nothing to do with her. Abigail Rhodes was sitting next to her boss. As always, they were never apart. She was dressed for the weather, in thick robes, scarf and coat. Her clothes were of good quality and her earrings and laurel were the same.
"These two have something going on for sure." The barbarian stared at this blankly.
The gray-eyed woman's disinterested gaze focused on the carriage window. The raindrops falling on the glass caught her attention much more than what was being said now. "I wish I was as free as you, sister. Can't you ask your boyfriend to be a little kinder to me? Even if this face is fake. The dark circles under the eyes are not," complaining loudly in her mind. Her expression showed no change as she packed everything she needed into a small briefcase. She also needed a good cup of coffee. Not wanting to think about how comfortable it would be to be in her bed right now, Vivian only let out a soft sigh as she felt the carriage stop in front of her destination.
Everyone grabbed their umbrellas. Harvey was the first to get off, followed by Abigail, and finally, herself. Her boss, the gentleman, closed the carriage door,
giving a quick thanks in her own way, which was to ignore the gesture as she got ahead and quickly got close to their destination. Looking up, Vivian couldn't help but whistle appreciatively. The United Artists Association was a colorful 3-story building, even by Lemberg standards, so much so that it stood out like the sun among stormy clouds despite the rain. The pillars had large and beautiful details painted on them, ranging from wings to animals and people in artistic positions. The doors had a rather unique design, being a somewhat irregular figure. The same details as the pillars covered its body, but instead of being painted, they were finely carved. The association's name was on a bronze plaque on the side of this door, which was shaped like a common rectangle. The trio quickly entered the building to take refuge from the rain. The negotiations were relatively quick. As it was an association with few job opportunities, the boss's idea fascinated them, and they agreed to participate and become partners. A few hours later, they had already returned to Wayne Enterprises. Now, the barbarian was reviewing the documents and signatures of the hired musicians. A while ago, everything had been formalized, and all that was left was to organize the documents. This had better be worth it. The woman did not attempt to hide the grimace on her face. She needed a break. Feeling that she had already done enough for the day and deserved one after so much effort, she left her office and went down the stairs to the ground floor, heading for the break room for a good, strong coffee. "Oh, Miss Vivian. How are you?" A deep yet playful voice spoke, and the woman turned to see a man approaching her with a smile. "Mr. Cordis, how can I help you?" Vivian, as always, was direct and looked at the man with evident annoyance. Cordis D was one of the musicians in charge of the cartoon's melodies, not to mention the main head. As strange as he looked, he was by far the most skilled of them all, according to what she had researched at the time. He was quite tall and thin, so it wouldn't be unusual to compare him to a noodle, in her words. His eyes were a light brown that were always narrowed, as if he were flying on some special herb. His hair was a dark gray with some black streaks, making him look both old and young. He was of clear Bayam ancestry and always wore a yellow shirt with an orange vest and mustard-colored pants. While tunics were the norm, it wasn't too unusual to wear shirts as well. Cordis rolled his eyes and raised his hands in defense. "I just wanted to ask you a question about Mr. Wayne." "And that would be?" Vivian raised an eyebrow suspiciously. The man put his hands down and put them back in his pockets, and said with some curiosity, "Is he okay?" The barbarian frowned. "When was that guy not well? Apart from last Friday, that was a unique occasion." She hadn't noticed anything unusual on the trip. He looked healthy and seemed as energetic as SVSG. "Why do you ask that? Mr. Wayne looks normal as always." Cordis looked at her for a moment before nodding and looking at the office with curious interest. "His melody is strange. I can't help but worry." Melody? Her frown deepened. He was becoming stranger and stranger. What was this guy talking about? "It's my way of saying it feels different, that's all." Cordis half-heartedly explained. "I'll be sending a sample of the music Mr. Wayne requested first thing tomorrow. If you could let him know, I have to get back to work." Before she could refuse, the thin man turned and left the building quickly. Dazed, Vivian could only watch as he disappeared through the doors. Sigh. "I always have to deal with these things." Why? Regretting a little, she could only sigh again to lighten the burden on her shoulders. Rolling her shoulders a little and leaving the strange thoughts about that guy behind, the woman quickened her pace to the break room, just in case someone else stopped her. Musicians are weird. While she thought that, she planned to tell her boss about this strange event. If the guy turned out to be a weirdo, she'd rather a wise owl dealt with him. Of course, that would be after her free hour. She will be damned if she worked for free.